Welcome back to the Respect to Drive podcast. I'm Tedward, and this is the one you've been waiting for. I've got Chris and Chris, the Cannonballers who made 3 runs within 6 months. You know the cars. I've reviewed both of them, the Audi S8 and the M5 Competition. And if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, I would encourage you to head on over to YouTube because I'm going to show about 2 hours of footage from the actual runs. I want to thank Boston Motorsports in Brighton, Massachusetts for letting us set up shop and record this, and a shout out to Garage 42, the storage facility in Woburn, Massachusetts, who is currently taking care of my E39 M5 this winter. If you need to store that car this winter or for the foreseeable future, give them a call, Garage 42 in Woburn, Mass. But without further ado, here are the legendary Cannonballers. Right. Well, let's go back in time a little bit. I don't want to tell the story of each run. You've done 3 runs. You two have been the core team on each run, and you've had 3 additional drivers, a third for every run. Although one of them wasn't a driver. We'll get poor Matt. We'll get to that. But first, I'd like to introduce you guys because you're both named Chris. And in the spirit of Cannonball and anonymity and the fact that we haven't done a year, maybe we won't give your last names, but introduce yourself with either a letter or something that we can use to differentiate, because those listening are going to be like, oh yeah, and then Chris said.
Well, you are always Christoph.
Yeah.
His alter ego.
My alter ego, I guess, Christoph. Also Chris D.
We'll go.
So both of those work.
Let's go Chris and Christoph. That'll be fun.
All right.
The Cannonball community is going to find this hilarious.
I'm sure.
Because they're like, oh, you turds. We know who you are.
Yeah.
But, all right. So let's start from the beginning. Where did this idea come from? Not because you invented Cannonball, but what made you think like, hey, I'm going to go and beat this record? Because at the time you were doing this, Doug and Arnie had set down their 27... what was it?
27-25,
which had beaten the, quote, unbeatable Ed Bolian record.
Well, when we set out to do this, the record was 28:50.
Yeah, when we started like planning in earnest, it was 28:50. So that was when we made, I think, the first spreadsheet, it was 28:50. And all of a sudden, I think we went into Matt's one day, and Matt was like, I heard that there's a new record. And we're like, what do you mean? And then shortly after, Doug and Arnie announced it, and we're like, all right, back to the spreadsheet. We're going to change everything now. After all the planning and everything, we now have a new time and a new goal.
What was the timeline on that? Because I remember you got, we'll talk about my involvement too, because you got me involved somewhere around, what was it, like October?
Probably.
Or November of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so kind of going way back, Chris and I have been friends forever.
Yeah.
And back when Alex Roy broke, we all knew of the Cannonball run from the movies and all that kind of stuff. But when Alex Roy broke the record back in 2006 and we all found out about it in 2007, we were like, we have to do that someday.
Yeah.
But at that point, we were like both just barely a year out of college when he announced it and barely making enough money to pay rent. So it just wasn't.
I got kicked out of a Land Rover dealership because they didn't think I had enough money to buy a Land Rover.
Yeah. Well, you sure showed them. Yeah. Because you didn't show up here in a Land Rover because it's broken in your driveway.
So
that's true.
That's
true.
It's one of those things where, and then when Ed broke it in 2013, I was just my career was just taking off and Chris's career was just taking off, and it just wasn't the time. And then over the last 2 years or so, we both decided that, okay, like we really want to do this. Now's better than ever when we're still relatively young and don't have families or anything at this point. And
yeah, you only disappoint a few people if you die in a horrible crash.
Honestly, the death part wasn't even something I was so concerned about. It was the going to jail part that I think I was more concerned about.
I wasn't concerned.
So
I don't know.
What do you do for a living, Christoph?
Nothing. Unemployed.
You seem to have a good handle on the law.
Yeah, so I guess the real conversation probably started in late 2018, where Chris, myself, and Matt were at Matt's new restaurant, Idle Hour.
Yeah.
And we were like, yeah, we're going to do this. Let's put a budget together, which we totally fucking blew. And let's pick a car. So we started talking about it, and like as time went on, We looked at Cadillac CTS-V. We looked at
the M5, which
looked
is
at
the
the
car we
M5
did the last
originally.
run in, but we decided against it for, I forgot why.
suspension.
But, yeah.
We were concerned about not having air suspension because everyone said you had to have a car with air suspension to
But
handle
it made
the
sense.
weight. It totally made sense. So we threw it out and ended up with the S8 Plus.
Yeah. At 2850, I think that was the car. Like, I think that was an appropriate car for it. I think if the record was 2850, I think we would have beat the record in that car. I mean, we did beat 2850 in that car. I think handedly. You know, and obviously with the COVID shutdown and everything, we went faster than we would have normally, but I think we still would have. So I think that was an appropriate car at the time. You know, I have some theories of how it became an inappropriate car and how now I think even the M5 is maybe like borderline like not the car to do it in. But we can get into that, I guess.
Yeah,
later.
we'll get into that. But I think the biggest thing I want to talk about for the inception of it is the difference. So, I mean, look, you're talking about how this is something you always wanted to do. You kind of tabled it for years, and it becomes a thing where suddenly you're like kind of getting serious about it. You're ready to actually put a credit card down on some of this equipment and make it happen. What is the thought process back then when you're like you've never done a cannonball, you're a pre-cannonballer, right? You've got the dream, which is where I think most listeners and people who watch these types of things fall into, because everybody says, oh, I want to do it, this is how I do it, this is what I do. How does that change between you're gearing up for it and you're preparing with the gear? Because I think gear is a big thing in your head at the time. You're like car, people, and equipment. Whereas like after you've got an idea of what goes into it, it's like you realize it's almost all about the people. The car matters for certain, but it's less of a thing. It's more about like the confidence to be able to go fast.
Right. So I mean, well, at least for me, when we were like, all right, we're really gonna do this. Like, this isn't just like us talking crap anymore. Like we've done for the past decade or so. Like, we're actually going to do this. And like, mind you, this was like the summer of 2019 that we started saying like, yeah, we're really going to do this. For me, it was like, all right, if we're really going to attempt this, let me get out Microsoft Excel and see like, you
what
know,
we gotta do.
Yeah, let's see what the numbers look like. And I'd never even planned. I mean, obviously when you're like thinking about it and daydreaming, you go into Google Maps and you do, Red Ball Garage to the Portofino.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, it says it's going to take 42 hours. And, all right. And so then, plugging that into Microsoft Excel, and then we broke it down into like 5 mile increments. And we're like, all right, like, what do we need to do for fuel mileage? What do we need to do for speed through all of these increments? Like, what are the directions? Do we think we can go that fast here? And then you start doing it, and it was like, yeah, I think it's probably possible. I think with what we have planned, and then you start making a list of things like to do that, we need like radar detector, we need laser jammer, we need a giant fuel cell. And I think for me, the biggest question was the fuel cell, like how big it should be, and started doing that like fuel economy planning. And that's when we kind of made the decision where like we need the car. Like if we don't know what car we're taking, these calculations become much, much more difficult and they're very abstract. So we need some concrete data. So we need to get a car. We need to start testing with that car and locking down what we're going to get for all this miles per gallon and speed and whatever.
I feel like, so Matt's not here, and Matt was our original third driver. I feel like there was like a 1 month period where we must have texted back and forth about which car and what the coefficient of drag was and the horsepower and the weight.
Yeah.
Like literally all day long, like trying to figure out like what makes
more spreadsheets.
Yeah, like
So
what
many
makes
more
like
spreadsheets.
what makes sense. And I think we got down to the S6, and we were like, okay, the S6 makes sense, but we're gonna have to get more power out of it.
Why power?
So it's 450 horsepower, like from the factory. But when you're trying to get from 100 to 160 very often and hold it there, like you got to figure like the shorter amount of time it takes to do that, the better. So a car that performs really well up top is what you need. So the more research I was doing, I kept coming up with like S8 Plus and RS7 turbos. Like I kept like coming up with RS7 turbos. So then I realized that the S8 Plus has the RS7 turbos and only weighs like 250 pounds more than the S6. So I'm like, all right, the S8 Plus is like 20 grand more expensive than the same year S6, but you know, if we can buy the car and then get out of the car for the same kind of money, like what's it really matter? All it is a short-term investment. It's like putting money in a savings account, sort of.
Only driven on Sundays.
Only driven on Sundays.
Only put about 3,000 miles on it.
Yeah. So, you know, so I said to Chris and Matt, I said, what do you think about the S8 Plus? And I sent him like the drag coefficient. I sent him the horsepower. I sent him the weight. I sent him the type of suspension, like everything. And like, Chris was like, I think that's it.
I think, yeah, we honed in on that, I think, pretty quickly looking at the spreadsheet, especially with, we talked to Bren Tuning, who was going to tune the car, and he's like, yeah, I can get some power out of this thing. We're like, all right.
So we started with a better baseline than the S6.
Yeah. Right. And we had to do, I mean, obviously we still did a lot to the car, but more like countermeasures and less performance. Like we tuned it. We eventually, after the first run, we put gyro discs on it, and we did other performance stuff, more like please don't break down on us type stuff.
Yeah, like cooling mods and those kind of things.
Yeah. But like the S6, that would have been a much larger build with like turbo upgrades and everything else. And while that would have been fun, that would have drained probably resources from other stuff.
Did you feel like you were going harder in the beginning because you didn't know what it was really going to be like? Did you feel like you were just like, let's just go as hard as we can? And it might be overkill, but we want to beat this, so like, fuck it, let's just do it.
Well, for the like getting everything.
Well, yeah, for the car. I mean, the car was nuts, and that's the thing is, I think a lot of folks who aren't in the Cannonball community, a lot of people knew about you because you had been in talks with, you know, Ed Bolian, and Ed was great with anonymity. He doesn't
really
mess
was.
around. He's not somebody who you say, hey, don't tell anybody, and he still tells Doug and Arnie and Fred and like, you know, those guys. He didn't tell anybody.
He basically was like, hey, there's a perfectly prepped car out there, so pay attention. That was pretty much all he said. And the Cannonball guys, when we met them at Switch Cars Doug's shop in Ohio, when we all met up for like a post-COVID party, if you will, in awards, they were like, yeah, you guys came out of nowhere, and everyone was talking about how you were going to be the car to beat and all this stuff because you just went nuts. And like thinking back on it, you know, we did buy a $60,000 S8 and put $40,000 worth of shit in it.
It was a lot.
So, you know, if you think about that, like we really did go. I mean, the fuel system alone, between the fuel cell, the setup, the lines, was like $7 grand.
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly a lot, but I think, at least in my mind, like if you're gonna do this and you're gonna do it, well, we thought we were gonna do it once. We did it 3 times, so we got our money's worth out of some of it, I guess.
We did.
You know, if you're gonna do it, I wanted to do it. I didn't want like any excuse, like after I did this and we didn't do it, which we obviously, you know, spoiler alert, we didn't do it. I didn't want to look back and like be like, you know, had we done, you know, X, Y, and Z, if we'd got a bigger fuel cell, if we had bought a faster car, if we had a better like laser jammer, we wouldn't have got pulled over. If we got a better this, if we got a better that. So I didn't want that like over my head for the rest of the, like, shucks, I could have done it if I didn't cheap out.
So we just kind of bought the best everything and threw it at the car.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of research sewed into it. What was the best? You know, we didn't just like, that's the most expensive, let's buy that.
What was the most ridiculous piece of equipment that, or I mean, I already know the answer to this. Let's just talk about the plane thing.
The plane thing? Oh, all right. So I guess for me, building the car was the coolest part of this whole thing. The drive out there was
awful.
I mean, it was awful, but like I was looking forward to it before I started doing it and realized how awful it was. But I loved the gadgets. I feel like we were building a James Bond car. And so I was like, how can I make something that we can use on this? So Arnie and Doug used some kind of plane avoidance thing to
collision system
to let them know if there was a plane overhead. And I was like, I never thought about planes. I'm like, let's look that up. So I started doing some research in the FAA database. And there were a lot of states along the route, particularly the southern route, that have planes. So I started compiling a list of all the tail numbers of all the police planes on our route.
Which is, by the way, all public information.
Yeah, that's all public. planes have to be registered, and just like cars. And then I was like, what can I use to track it? So I started doing some Googling, and I have some coding experience and Raspberry Pi experience, and I decided that, if I got a ADS-B antenna, which is the system that planes use to talk to control towers and to each other to let them know where they are, I can basically read those signals. Those signals are unencrypted. They're publicly available. Anyone can set up an antenna and read these signals. And I could log them and set alerts for when those tail numbers that I had researched popped into existence. And I found some other pre-existing software to help me do that, and some pre-existing maps that I modified that would use our GPS location and basically alert us to police planes overhead that were within a 300-mile radius. It also, at the same time, this was feeding these police alerts to a couple databases that compile from lots of different people. So ADS-B Exchange, FlightAware, Flight Radar 24, and these are the same databases that JBV1 and other police notification apps for phones that exist. These are the same databases those things pull their plane data from. So not only do we have our own in-car alerts, we're crowdsourcing alerts from other people that we're also supplying our data to live in the car real time.
So for like the idiot's version of that, you have a thing that can tell you there's a police plane overhead.
Yeah.
You should just keep an eye out.
Yeah, it tells you like what direction it is to the car, where it is. You can pull up a map. So we had a Wi-Fi network in the car, so anything that was attached to the network, like phones, laptops, you could log on to the computer and it would pull up a map and show you where the plane is, the plane in question, what's its altitude, what's its location, heading, how far it is from you. And then make a decision like, is this thing coming for us? Is it doing like a speed sweep over the highway? Like, what is it doing? And decide whether it's good, bad, indifferent. And we, in Los Angeles in particular, we had several incidents where helicopters were close and we were looking up, saying like, okay, it says it's there and there it is. And it doesn't look like it's near us, but,
Good to know, yeah.
Yeah, good to know.
All right, so the technology is all good and great, but you guys had a fairly elaborate spotter network, and that just grew and grew and became really something to marvel at.
I think when I look at like all the technology and all the shit we did, the number one thing that helped us, saved us, forget about everything in the car, was the spotters, number one, and during daylight, the binoculars, the gyro stabilization binoculars, number two. Initially, we had a spotter network of like 22, 24 for run one, but that was all agreed to, before COVID happened. And remember, like, we started planning this, like our date to go in April was like already planned. There was no like, yeah, we're doing this because of COVID, like we're putting this together. No, it was already like that date was decided on 10 months prior. So we were going that date regardless. So when COVID happened, so we had lined up this network of people. We were flying people, from Boston to different places. We had people that were going from Texas to different. It was like we had a really strong network. And at that time, we're like, oh yeah, we 100, 150 miles, of spot per spotter. Like that's probably fine. And then
explain what a spotter does, because I think a lot of people in the Cannonball community, you say spotter, they're like, oh yeah, we got spotters.
So you call it spotter, some call it scout. I mean, it depends.
Pre-runner, I've heard.
Yeah, pre-runner. The idea is they're out ahead of you. They're not necessarily driving ahead of you at 150 miles an hour. No, I mean they're half an hour to an hour ahead of you, or hour, and then eventually you catch them. And
you don't want them driving 150 miles an hour, because if they get pulled over,
this is pointless.
They're no good to you. So I think that's a common misconception is, if I'm spotting for these people, I need to go just as fast as they are. We'd actually prefer it if you didn't.
Yeah, we need you to be doing like half of the speed we're doing, because what they're doing is they're driving out ahead and alerting us to what's out ahead. Now, some people are like, oh, it's a way to evade the police. I mean, while they're letting us know where cops are, I mean, there's things about construction. There are things about people that are on the side of the road broken down. There's debris in the road. There's animals. There's all kinds of different things that they're letting us know about ahead of time. And, each run, so the first run that we did, we lost half our network because at that time, no one wanted to get on a plane. No one wanted to touch a hotel. No one wanted to do anything.
Yeah. And we were in legitimate shutdowns.
It was shut down. So half the stuff, half the flights were canceled. Half the hotels weren't even open. So it was like everything we had planned really got blown up. And honestly, not having spotters on run 1 in the middle of the country was why we didn't break the record. We missed the record by 5 minutes at the time.
Right. Well, plus Cannonball at the time, I think just to put this in context for like public perception, the Audi A8 that had gone out had not been well received by the public.
No.
When that car went across and set, what was it, a
2638.
People were pissed. And in fact, even the magazines that openly support Cannonball all the time were really talking shit about these kids, which for what it's worth, that was probably one of my favorite runs because those guys managed to go out and do a record-breaking run. Yes, in COVID, but with like a borrowed leased car that they shoved a few marine tanks in.
With a hand pump, I heard.
Hand pump. And it was limited to 130 miles an hour.
They must have not slowed down at all. Like I wish there was like a video I could watch of that run and compare it to what I remember of our first run, just to see the difference between the two in those 2 weeks. They went 2 weeks before we did. We tried to change our run to that week, but with logistics with all the spotters,
it's crazy.
Impossible.
It's absolutely crazy.
I'd like to see what conditions they did it in, because I would imagine, there's been some talk amongst Cannonball people that might have been the golden weekend that,
Well, 4 records fell that day.
I know. It was a crazy weekend. I think, if we went that weekend or Doug and Arnie went that weekend, not to discredit them, but we had some planning where I think they kind of just, a couple weeks ahead was like, hey, let's do this. So I think, we could have set a pretty good time that week too. So
and unfortunately, when we went, once you got like west of Pennsylvania, there was traffic. There was like down south, there were a lot of truck traffic.
Yeah, so
there were people out, there were cops out. I mean, it was
one particular difference between their weekend and our weekend was in between the two, they lifted the
truck timing ban.
Yeah,
right?
the amount of time truckers could spend on the road, they increased it so that there was a lot more trucks on the road. I think for us, it's tough to tell. It's all hypothetical.
Yeah, and there were definitely before we went, I kept seeing articles about, people speeding at high rates of speed getting pulled over because there was no traffic out there. Go figure. And that the cops were going to be out more often. And again, that happened to us when we were. That happened to us, and that's why we weren't able to break the record. So
right. Well, all right. Let's talk about run 1 a little bit, because number 1, this is your first go. This is your first attempt. What's the mindset going in? And then let's talk about Matt as well, because Matt was the third driver, and things didn't go as planned.
Right. So we had a plan, and
it was a good plan.
It was a good plan. It was a great plan. We some would say the best plan. No, we had it all down.
No one's ever seen anything like it.
No one's ever seen. A lot of people are saying it was a very good plan.
Anyway, go for it.
So we were planning this out, and we've been planning, like we said, for almost a year at this point, 3/4 of a year. And so we had it pretty down to what we thought we needed to do. And we were going to change drivers every, 3.5 hours. We were going to stop for fuel exactly a third of the way across the country, then another 2/3 of the way across the country. So everyone was going to have two equal driving stints. And, we had it all planned out. We had it all mapped out. We knew exactly what gas station we were going to stop at. We knew exactly what fuel mileage we were going to get. And then we didn't even get into Pennsylvania. Maybe we barely got into Pennsylvania, and Matt is vomiting out the window at 150 miles an hour. So immediately plan.
And is he
ruined.
Is he in the back? Is he in the front?
So at that point, I don't want to talk about who was driving and where, but at that point, we had gotten out of New York in less than 4 minutes. Yeah. Which is insane.
Red Ball to New Jersey. Because, all right, I was following you on Find My Friends at the time.
Yeah.
Because you had shared your location. I remember getting ready, and I was just sitting in bed, and I looked at the Find My Friends. You're at the Red Ball, and it was time.
Yeah.
And I got out of bed. I went down to get a bowl of ice cream because I eat so much fucking ice cream. But so I eat.
Where do you put it?
I know it's the only. I probably eat nothing other than ice cream. But like I fucking go down, get ice cream. I come back upstairs. I look at my phone, and you're already through the tunnel. And I was like, how on earth?
I mean, it was so dead.
There was nobody.
I mean, there was literally no one there, and we're like, holy crap! Like, we could really do this.
Yeah, when we drove into New York, it was vacant.
Yeah, I mean, like we're like literally ghost town, and
There were motorcycles doing like wheelies.
oh yeah,
Like,
it was it was like
Yeah.
motorcycles, quads, like all those groups of guys.
Oh my
It was
God.
like, what is going on here? It's like
Yeah.
like a lawless, vacant New York City.
So
Perfect.
we get
Yeah, perfect for us.
we get in New Jersey and we're ripping, and again, there's like no traffic, and we made a wrong turn real quick and then fixed it like in less than a minute, and then we're back on our way, and Matt's in the back seat and goes, "Hey guys, we gotta slow it down." No,
Slow it down.
no, we
There's
can't.
no
He's
slowing
like,
down.
guys, like I think I'm getting car sick. I'm like, all right. He's like, but just keep going, I'll be fine. Like, okay, like here's some Dramamine, whatever, like see what happens. So I don't know, we're 2 hours in, and I hear the window open.
Oh no.
And he's like, don't slow down. And I look over and I'm like, oh, we're doing a very high rate of speed, and there's out the window. Like, okay. So anyways, he's
And
like,
it's never clean. It always gets in the car.
So we continue on, and every single weight transfer of the car is upsetting him.
And you're going through Pennsylvania at
Oh
this
yeah,
point.
and that's probably other than the Coconino Forest, that was probably the most technical section to go through.
Yeah, it's twisty. You're going through the Appalachians.
Yeah, so I won't tell the whole story, but he keeps getting sick. So we throw him in the front seat, figuring, hey, like if he's in the front, maybe we'll get car sick, because people get car sick in the back. Just kept getting worse. So we kind of lost our front seat spotter, and whoever was and then we went from having 3 drivers to 2, and our whole plan got jacked up. So
and he never got behind the wheel.
what's that?
No.
He never got behind the
He
wheel.
was supposed to drive second, and then we got to the driver change, and he was like, "I'm not driving."
So we switched, and I'm not going to tell you who was driving where, but it just kept getting worse and worse. And when we got to Texas, unfortunately, something fell off the back of a truck, not in the got it for free sense, but literally fell off the back of a truck and hit the front of the S8.
Yeah.
He didn't really think anything of it, because we're like, everything good,
And
keep going.
And we were going like 65 miles an hour. It was like
we were in traffic,
construction
right.
zone.
So all of a sudden, like, man, it's kind of getting hot in here. And I look, I'm like, oh, it's 82 degrees out. We're in Texas. Go figure. So I hit the AC button, which I thought I already turned on. And then lights up and lights off again. Like, that's weird. Lights off again. Lights off again. And I'm like, I think the AC crapped out. That's really weird. So anyway, so we keep driving on. And now at that point, Matt is like inconsolable.
Yeah.
Because
And he's sweating bullets.
He's
He's
sweating.
ghost
He doesn't
white.
feel well. We're in a black car in Texas in the middle of the day, and it's now it's 90 degrees out, and God knows how hot it is in the car. Can't keep the windows open for too long because it's too loud. You can't hear yourself think when you're at that speed, and unfortunately for Matt, he's like, I don't know if I can finish, guys. So one of our spotters in the New Mexico, Arizona area is a good friend from Boston who happens to live out there. And he, after spotting for us, we just yanked the car to the side of the road, dumped poor Matt out on the side of the highway. I don't even think the door was shut yet. He wasn't even in the next car, and we were already off again.
We basically left him on the side of the highway.
Yeah, and and like Matt, Chris, and I are the closest of friends. We talk every day, and Chris and I were like, "Oh, that was bad. that was bad."
We
But
sure hope he's not going to get stranded in the desert.
yeah, so our right. So our friend picks him up, and they've still got a 4-hour ride back to Phoenix through the same kind of roads. Thankfully, he had air conditioning. But what's the Buick version of the Chevy Trax?
Oh, like an Enclave or something?
An Encore. Thank
Encore.
you. And their rental car was a Buick Encore, which is the biggest penalty box. So Matt went and got to the hotel, and he was all delirious and messed up, and he ended up flying back from Phoenix the next day. But Chris and I continued on, and we continued on through the desert, and into the night and into California. And, we were behind when we dumped him out.
We were.
We were way behind because of some of the things that happened in the middle of the country.
Yeah, you guys got pulled over twice.
Yeah.
That's not good. Everyone always asks, what do you, like, how do you...
I got pulled over twice.
You got pulled over twice, yeah. Everybody always asks, how do you deal with cops? And I said, you don't get pulled over. That's the answer. You don't get pulled over.
You don't deal with them.
I think our total stop time due to police was about 22 minutes.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So if you think about stop time, and we all know all about stop time. Yeah. So when you think about stopped time, you are losing so much pace from 100 average to 0. I mean, you are just losing. 22 minutes stopped is losing an hour and a half.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just
the worst thing you can do is stop.
Yeah. Even if you're doing 50, at least you're moving.
Yes.
But yeah. So, and then we were a little gun shy after the second pullover, just because it's like, oh man, like.
Well, no, that's rattling. That's really rattling.
Yeah, the first one I was like, whatever, we'll keep going. And then the second one, he followed us for a while. I knew he was behind us for a while. I was concerned about getting called in. And we're going along, and Chris finally goes, hey, dude, either you put your foot down or we turn this thing around, because at this rate, we were just losing time. So I said...
We were going at a rate of speed at that point that was like, it was fast enough that we would have got pulled over again, but it was too slow to break the record. So I'm like, what is the point of this? We're either going to get pulled over again and not break in, that's it. Right. So, or we're not going to break the record. So why put us at risk? You need to pick one or the other.
So by the time we got to our last fuel stop in New Mexico, we were about even again on pace. And then when we stopped there, and then when we stopped to drop Matt off again, we fell behind again. So we raced through the desert into California through the ag stop in the middle of the night. There was zero traffic. I mean, it was nothing, so we were able to go at a high rate of speed. We were about 30 miles out. I'm looking at the clock, and I'm looking at Chris, and he's looking at me, and we're talking to you.
Right.
And you became our de facto mission control, like doing math for us.
Yeah, it was too much with two people in the car.
Yeah, you couldn't communicate, you couldn't spot. It was just
because at the time, the run one, your spotting strategy was you had
the person in the back seat.
You had the person in the back seat. You were talking directly to spotters.
Yeah.
Spotters were calling you.
Yeah.
And hoping that the line was going to stay open.
Yeah.
You're also trying to do all the calculations. You're also trying to actually look ahead of yourself for cops.
It was too. It was
too much. For two people.
Too much for two people. Even when Matt was sick, he was doing his best to talk to people. But when you're car sick, you can't look at your phone for text messages.
No, it's fucking useless. You're fucking useless.
Right. And you feel bad because the poor guy, he spent so much time and money doing this with us, and other than getting to New York, he missed out on a lot of it. Now, turns out there's some health things going on that we figured out later on, and it sucks because we would have loved to have taken him on the second or third run, but we just weren't able to.
Right.
No, I don't think he very vehemently did not want to get back in that car.
No,
I have to applaud him for being able to do that, though. To get out of that car after literally a year of preparation, that's a fucking hard thing to do.
It was definitely, and it was tough for us to basically be like, hey man, you got to get out. Because
I think it was an easier decision for him at the time because he felt so awful.
I think we kind of made the decision for him because I think he felt like he was letting us down.
Right.
But at that point, it was like, dude, this isn't helpful because you're so sick. It's better off just letting us get in the front seat together and do what we do. I mean, Chris and I have been driving together since we had our licenses, so we figured it out.
Well, so overnight, this is what happened. So I was following you guys on Find My Friends. This is pre-Glimpse,
before we even knew what that was.
Right. So this is a fucking problem because you had Glimpse, and I think you were sharing it with one. I think you may have only been sharing it with Ed. Or something like that.
We didn't know about Glimpse until Ed was like, "Oh, what's your Glimpse?" And we're like, "Well, what is that?"
Which is amazing because Find My Friends is a piece of shit. Find My Friends is like, hey, I'm here. And so what I was doing that night was I was following you on Find My Friends, and I would zoom in and be like, all right, they're about at this junction. And then I would wait 10 minutes and go on Google Maps and say, okay, now they're at this location because Find My Friends only updates every minute or two. So I'm like, all right, 10 minutes is enough time that this is relatively accurate. And then I would go on Google Maps, I would trace the distance, and I would find your average speed over that amount of over that distance.
Putting that engineering background.
Yeah, thank God for D Street, right? D equals speed times time. So you go back to our distance equals speed times time. So you go back, and then I'd say, okay, if they're here, I know they left at, let's say, 6 p.m. or 8 p.m. or whatever from Red Ball. I'd go and see what's your actual average across this whole thing. And I remember going to bed. I slept that night. I did. I went to bed because my job was done. I was videographer. My job was to document everything leading up to it and then hope for the best in the morning. And I remember following you guys till about 1 or 2 in the morning, and you had an average that was outrageous. I think you had brought it up to somewhere around the, I don't know.
It's like 106 or something, maybe?
It was like higher than that. I think you were 111 into the night. And so I went to bed, and then when I woke up, I checked it, and I thought, oh, my math is wrong, because it had dropped to like 102. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, what happened? And so I'm trying to piece together what happened. I don't have communication with you guys because also I'm afraid to call you. I'm like, I'm not bothering you guys in the car. And I remember texting you and just saying like, hey, you need to go 119 miles an hour or it's over. And I think that's all I said. I just said, this is your average. This is what you need. Hands off. I just walked away. And somewhere in Arizona or New Mexico or somewhere like that, that's when you guys started texting me like, hey, can you give us updates once in a while? And I said, yeah. So I set up just a pad, paper, a bunch of maps and a bunch of calculators in my room. And I'm sitting there doing this out. Now, this is all my parents' house. So my mom is like legitimately involved in this now, where she's like watching this.
She's like, what are these people doing?
And she's like, how are they doing? How are they doing? And then toward the end, that's when you shared me the glimpse, and it made my job a fuckload easier because
we figured out glimpse.
Yeah, we figured out how to use it.
It was the best because I went from having to wait 10 minutes to figure out what your speed was to having it instantly.
Right.
And watching that, then it started really building the picture because before I'm just looking at averages over a 10-minute period. Now I'm watching you guys accelerate and slow down from 65 to 180 over and over and over again. I'm like, holy shit, there must be a lot of trucks on the road. So now I'm starting to really put together and contextualize what you're going through. Yeah. And I just remember the last bit of that run through California. I was watching it and it was just a dead fucking sprint because I remember the speed just kept going up and up and up because you had brought it down where you needed you only need to go 116 now. But then you start getting into some traffic. It's like, oh, you need 119. And then it starts going to like 120, 125, 130, 160. And then you're like, all right, it's fucking over. But I'm looking at the clock and I'm looking at what you're doing and I'm like, this is a tie. You're gonna match this fucking white Audi. And you show up 5 minutes late.
Yeah, that was pretty awful.
Yeah, it's pretty frustrating. I mean, you kind of think about with it being such a small amount of time, you're like, okay, like I'm like, shit, if I only got pulled over once, but it's, how do you?
Well, all you do is go back in time and say all the things you could have done.
Right.
In all honesty, too, it was probably only like 3.5 minutes because we got off of the highway and there was a red light and we stopped at the red light because we realized that we weren't going to make it in time. So at that point, no sense in braking.
Right. Let's not get arrested now.
Yeah. So we stopped at the red light for a minute. So it probably was only like 3.5 minutes if we were on pace to do it.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it was definitely pretty heartbreaking to get there and go through all that. And it's just us. I mean, there's no one there. There's no one to greet us. It's the middle of the night. And then
except for Jeff.
Our last spotter, met us there. He was all excited, and we're like, yeah, man, nothing to be excited about. And then, as we're talking, the Redondo Beach police pull in and, hi, you're not social distancing. You're out past curfew. Please leave.
And you're like, yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, see you later.
What's it like to pull away from that? What's it like to, because you arrive, and it's a big deal, and now you've said you've done it, but what's it like to pull away from that?
So one of us was driving, obviously, and that person did not want to get back.
No, we weren't driving.
So the other of us got in the car, drove, and I think we once we got back in the car, if you ever broken a bone, you're in shock at first, right? You're like, oh wow, it doesn't really hurt, and then a few minutes go by and you realize you've broken the bone. You're like, holy crap, this really hurts.
Yeah. That
was what it was. It was all of a sudden you went into shock on the ride to the hotel, and your whole body is just almost shutting down. It's really hard. When I hear Chris Clemens and Mark Spence went all the way to Redondo Beach, turned around and drove back and did it back, I'm like, yeah, okay, because by the time you get there, you are so dead. Yeah. You are so drained. And if you didn't break the record, you're so let down that you lost all that adrenaline.
Yeah.
And we've done that 3 times.
So everyone's like, oh, don't you get tired? I was not tired on any of the 3 runs until immediately after the run finished, and then I was exhausted, immediately. You don't feel it because you're on all this adrenaline, and, you're pulling into the Portofino, and you're just like, yeah, I could keep going, and then as soon as you like get out of that mood, like open the door to the car, it all like just rushes out of you, and it's like, well, time for bed, and see you later.
So you get to the hotel and you're like can barely put one foot in front of the other because you're so like screwed up. Your legs are all tight, your back hurts, and you go to check in and they're like, oh, where are you coming from? I'm like, oh, Massachusetts. Oh, did you bring a car? Yep. What's the plate number? And you're like, oh, when did you leave? And it's like, why are you asking so many questions? But they're just asking for to make conversation,
right?
And so we check into the hotel and immediately, passed out, got up the next morning. Now, we originally had planned to make this like a week-long trip.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, hey, we're going to drive back to Boston afterwards. Like the three of us are friends. We're going to stop. We're going to see there's no traffic. We'll have a good time.
What a nice vacation.
Now, mind you, at that point, we've got no air conditioning. The brakes are completely gone. Yeah. And I woke up.
The S8 was hurting.
Yeah. So I said we woke up. I wake him up. And I'm like, hey, man, I'm trying to book us flights and get our car picked up. And he's like, wait, what? And I'm like, dude, the flights are like $100 to fly home, and I can ship the car for $800. He's like, oh, yeah, just book the flights. So we dropped the car off with a friend in L.A., and the car got picked up a few days later.
We had a private JetBlue flight home.
It was us and like 5 people on the plane. That was it. It was awesome.
Yeah, that was great.
Other than the agony of defeat. And it was probably a good 10 days afterwards for me to start feeling like a normal human again. Like I was so bushed from that whole.
Yeah, the first one, I think more than anything took it all out of me. I don't know whether because I didn't know what to expect.
Well, we drove more than we ever did.
It's true.
I think we were really, we did 2 nights because we left in the middle of the night one night, got in the middle of the night.
True.
And I think just like all the excitement leading up to it just took it out of you.
Yeah. Well, all right. So now you've learned a lesson, right? now you've experienced
many lessons.
You've experienced defeat. You've experienced something that like it just fucking sucks. And the thing is, when you think about it, more people have experienced that than have experienced a win.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
I mean, there's dozens of cannonballers out there, dozens and dozens of cannonballers out there. And we only know of like maybe 10 because they're the ones who win. Unfortunately, even though your time that night was still faster than Ed Bullion's quote-unquote unbeatable record, it doesn't fucking matter because somebody beat it already.
Yeah.
Right? You were faster than Doug and Arnie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. So, and that's the thing, like, everyone's like, oh, are you going to do this and are you going to do that? It's like, we didn't break a record. So, like, why would I do that? Like the first time we're talking about this now is, like, months later because, like, we don't really have anything. Like, everyone's like, oh, are you going to go on VinWiki? It's like, dude, I didn't break a record. What, like,
right.
Why am I going to fly to Atlanta? What am I going to talk about? Not breaking a record?
Right.
So,
we get to talk to you instead.
Yeah, I know. I'm the fucking consolation prize.
No, that's not what I meant. I think what I mean is so many people are like, oh, like you did this thing, so you should go do this big like national fucking TV
tour,
whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, but no, like that's not what we did. And even from the get-go, like we got you involved from a documenting standpoint.
Yeah, my job was to fucking film.
Right, and then it became a mission control standpoint. So right from the get-go, it was always going to be, no, Tom's going to get whatever, and if someone else wants to talk to us, they can talk to us second.
Right. So, all right, let's go. When does it come to a point where you say, we've got the car, I'm bitter, we're going again?
I think.
Couple days.
Yeah, I think. So that's the thing, like missing the record by 5 minutes, like we were just like so pissed. Like,
yeah, and we felt that there was a lot of mitigating circumstances of why we didn't break the record. We got pulled over twice. Obviously, that's a big one. We would have broken the record if we had not got pulled over either of those times. Yeah. Not to blame Matt, but him getting sick, I mean, that certainly slowed us down and threw us off of our plan and like whatever. That's not his fault, but it certainly, didn't help.
So round 2, you are now, I guess we can say, you're veterans now. Now you know what it's really like to be in there.
Yeah, I mean, round 2, we got the car back, and we'd had some damage from basically what happened was the thing that flew up and hit the car took out the AC condenser and the radiator. Thankfully, the radiator held together really until it got back. So had to get the car repaired. I got that all squared away.
It was like $12,000.
Something like that. And got it all back together. And once we got it all back together, we said, okay, we're ready to go again. But obviously we can't take Matt. And one of our friends who actually spotted for us, who we know is a really competent driver, from the get-go, it said, hey, like literally from when we were planning, he's like, I want to help planning. Like, I want to be your backup in case something happens. Like, was all over us about it. And we just said, okay, like, cool. Like, you're in. So we added our friend Sam.
Yep.
And he really helped with a lot of the planning. He brought a lot more spotters. Now we're into May, and more people are willing to like go out and do stuff. So our spotter network grew at that point, you know, to like 27 or so across the country. Sound right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, 26.
Because basically
27.
now you basically had 100 miles per spotter.
Yeah, so it made a lot more sense. Like we lost one or two people, right? You know, from as things happened, someone got sick or whatever it was, and but we felt okay. Now we've got another competent driver. We've got an even better plan. We have the experience. We've upgraded the brakes on the car. We've upgraded the cooling on the car. We've done all these things to make everything better. We missed it by 5 minutes, and then someone goes out.
Yeah, and Arnie.
Well, Fred Ashmore first,
yes. Yeah.
and then Arnie and Doug around the same time.
Yeah, this is what's fucking brutal about Cannonball, is that because it's not an event. It's not like, oh, we all go on the same day. It's like every day that goes by is another day that someone could go out and set the bar higher.
So we didn't, like, most people didn't know about those times. Like, that was not a public thing.
No, that was quiet. In fact, when I did the video on the S8, I think
the second
time, I had a piece of paper in the back that I had to edit out. I accidentally left it open because it said Fred's time and Doug and Arnie's time on it.
Which there were probably 10 people in the entire world that knew what those times were. And, you know, after our first run, we had become friendly with Arnie and Doug. I mean, obviously they didn't know us from anywhere, but then they saw what we did and they're like, holy crap, like, let's chat.
Yeah, suddenly, like, you became Cannonballers.
Yeah, and you know, so they were cheering us on to beat the A8 who had beat them, right?
Right.
And
yeah, it's funny. The enemy of your friend is your...
Right. And then when we didn't break it, the next day they went out and bought that S6 and then built it in a few days and then went out and did it again. So we were like, we weren't really sure if we wanted to do it again, but when we saw they did, like, so we know we can do this. Yeah. We have a better car. We have a faster. And again, if you go back, the S6 was where we originally started, so we knew what that car's limitations were. They had to do the turbo upgrades. They had to do all that stuff. And they built the car in 3 days.
It's nuts.
Right. So we said, all right, we're going to go back out, and we at least want to be faster than the A8, but we would love to break into the 25s and see what happens.
And I remember the night they did it because we were all together.
Yeah, we were.
They texted you and said, hey, just wanted to let you know. Because it's a very gentlemanly, friendly brotherhood of like,
it's a great group of guys. I mean, it's really a lot of fun.
And they were like, here's our glimpse. We're going.
Yeah.
And you said good luck. And we all just sat around a campfire telling the stories of the last run thinking, holy shit, they're going to fuck us up because we had already planned our next run.
Yeah. So they went for it. And, you know, we know what that time is now, 25:38, 25:39? 39. And, you know, so we saw that Fred did 25:55 and they did 25:39. We were like, okay. So we went out to that Cannonballers get-together in August?
Yeah.
August. And on the way back from there, it was myself and Sam were in a rented X7, and you flew home.
Wait, this is after the second run.
This is after the second run. I'm sorry. And Sham and I were talking, and I was just sitting there, like, seething the fact that, like, we weren't the ones to be, you know, celebrated, if you will.
Yeah.
And I got home, and I said, screw it. So when I bought the S8, I reached out to Matt McGovern at McGovern Auto Group, who's a good friend of mine, and I said, hey, this is what we're doing. You know, I need a car. He's like, yeah, man, I'll take care of you. Whatever you need for a car, we'll hook you up. Good to go. So, and then they bought the car back, too. So it was really a non-sponsor sponsorship deal where they were like, hey, we'll sell you the car. We'll buy the car right back. Like, however you want to do it with the S8. So I said, hey, I want to do this again. I need an M5. At Boston Motorsports, Maserati, you have an M5 comp. It has ceramic brakes. That's the car I need. Yeah, whatever you need.
Well, let's go back to run 2 a little bit first because
the difference is there. A, you had a lot more spotters. B, you outsourced all of the communication, basically.
Yeah,
Right.
so
You did such a good job.
It's pretty wild.
Kind of ad hoc on the first run that we recruited you.
you
for
were a
the
victim
second
of your
run.
own success.
It's true. So I'll explain a little bit because I've never talked about my role
Yeah, I think you
publicly
should.
because it's a little weird. But basically, I became the mission control, and that meant that my job was to lift all of the communication between the spotters and you guys. Every spotter is on the phone with my team at Mission Control, which was, I won't tell where it was because I'm sure the business owner doesn't really want me involving him in that way, but we had a shipping container with like a 75-inch TV screen. We were watching live front and rear view cameras from the black view in your car. I was on the phone with you the entire time, and I had a call center with 2 operators at all times. So that allowed me to have the current spotter on the phone giving information, feeding that into a spreadsheet, which then I would read and convert to you. Basically, hey, cop at mile marker 13, you're doing 180 miles an hour, you slow down a mile before, you see the cop, confirm it, and you're off. And this allowed you guys to focus on driving. It allowed you guys to focus on spotting inside the car, and it allowed you guys to not have to be like fiddling with shit.
Yeah,
I think that's a lot of energy wasted.
it is.
And you know, that was a different ballgame. But what were the limitations of that run? Like, what made you say, hey, for run 3, we need a different car. We're done with this S8.
So I think, like we said, we picked the S8 Plus when the record was 2850, and that was a perfectly appropriate car at that time. Like big German sedans with a lot of power. You know, you get to the middle of the country where it's dead straight. There's no elevation changes, and you can just go as fast as you want. I think that's fine at 2850. When you're in the 25s, it's only so fast you can go across the middle of the country, and the 25s, that's essentially maxed out. You're just going your top speed the
Right,
entire
186-ish, and you're, you know.
Yeah. Where you have to make up the time then is the non-straight flat area of the country, which is going through Pennsylvania and the Appalachians, going through Colorado, Utah, through the Rockies.
Well, so run 1, you went southern route. Run
Right,
2, you went
right.
northern. That was mostly because Doug and Arnie had just said, oh, yeah, you should.
Well, after doing the southern route, you know, from a tradition standpoint, which was where like the original, you know, route was
Yeah.
from way back when, we wanted to do that because we thought it was the right thing to do. It's what, you know, our original plan. That's what Ed broke the record in. Again, we were trying to break Ed's record, at Bullion, that is. And but when we did that southern route, we realized a lot of the issues with it and why it's really difficult to set a record there. There's more 2-lane highways. There's more truck traffic. There are certain states that are insane when it comes to enforcement. Like just, you know, when you spend 3 hours in a state and you see 14 speed traps,
dude.
I mean, you just know, like, from an enforcement standpoint, like, that's what they're doing. So it didn't make sense. I think the heat down there was another thing of like, holy crap, it gets really hot during the day.
And as you know, and if you're in a car that's already prone to overheating and you're going at a very high rate of speed, that's not great
Right.
for a car.
And we knew we were going almost in the summer. It was late spring when we went
Yep.
the second time. So it was like, all right, like, let's take a route that we think will be cooler. And then, yeah, I mean, Arnie and Doug's run did have some legitimacy to, like, hey, maybe that is a better route. And then as we started working out our spotters for run 2, we realized we had more spotters that were closer to the northern route.
Right, you can fly people to Denver and spread them out.
Right.
You can get people
We
in
had
Vegas
people,
and
right, we
spread
had
them
people
out.
that we knew that live in Illinois, live in Ohio, people that we knew that could get to Iowa and Nebraska, which is the toughest place to fill because of where they lived. It was just a lot. And again, flying people to Denver from Boston is a lot easier than flying people from Boston to St. Louis or wherever. So
yeah.
Boston to Amarillo.
yeah,
It's not
Boston
very-
Amarillo, not exactly
not
a great
popular
route.
flight.
Right. So, you know, sending people to Denver, I could send people to Denver and they would go out and spot in Utah and Nebraska. So I could send people to Chicago, they could spot in Ohio and Iowa.
Right.
So it just made it a lot, you know,
Right.
and when you're flying people all over the place and you're spending that much money flying people all over the place, you know, you want to try to get the best deal you can. And those routes are just, you know, if I fly someone to Amarillo, it's going to cost me $700. I flew 5 people to Chicago and it cost me $480.
Dude.
because the time,
Yeah.
the flights were just so cheap. So it just made a lot more sense.
Well, and then now you're chasing a 2539. This is the I mean, we've literally entered like a totally new realm of speed, because 25s are now. That's nuts.
Yeah, it's a very high average.
And you're chasing that in the S8. You're still under somewhat COVID lockdowns, but run 2, oddly enough, was during right after George Floyd's murder. And
Oh boy.
we were afraid, it was a weird. All right, so this is the fucked up thing about Cannonball, because I can remember planning all this and looking through major cities and thinking, are there going to be road closures? Are there going to be riots? Because nobody knew what was really going to happen.
Yeah.
We had seen all kinds of stuff on TV. We didn't know where it was going to be located. And it was a very bizarre thing to be like, A, taking advantage of COVID, and B, thinking, where are the riots going to be? Are they going to impact our run? It was like such a fucking ethical mindfuck.
And they almost did.
Yeah, they came really close in New York. We were at the starting line listening to the police scanner, and they're like getting closer and closer, street by
Block
street.
They were
by block.
Yeah,
by
you guys were
block.
starting to they were starting to close roads, and we were looking at the time, and it was like, if we don't go now, this is fucking over, because we're stuck in New York.
And the problem is if you leave early, you're risking, is my spotter to their spot yet?
Right.
Has my, that kind of stuff. And
Everything's so
every-
organized. There's no way to be flexible.
Yeah.
Once you've made the plan, that's the fucking plan.
Yeah.
You have to do it.
By the way, rain or shine, and we were really lucky in that respect.
Yeah, we got really lucky with weather. We wasted all of our luck with the weather. We
Pretty much.
ran out of it on everything else.
I would have dealt
but
with some
the
more
weather-
rain for more luck.
Yeah.
So run 2, high level traffic in Colorado.
Yeah, so if you want to talk about what happened there.
Yeah, so like I said, we were in the S8, so going through the Rockies is not the S8's forte already.
No, she's a big girl. She doesn't do transitions.
No,
She
I mean-
doesn't like going back and forth and twisting and turning very much. She's a little wallowy, especially at that point. We filled up for our last fuel stop right after Denver, so we had a
So it
full 80-something gallons.
Yeah, actually
of fuel.
450 pounds of fuel on board.
Yeah.
Like just as we get into the Rockies.
Yeah, so we're sloshing back and forth, and so we're not going as fast as we had hoped. There's a lot of traffic to the Rockies that day, and then we get to right about where the I think it's the Eisenhower Tunnel is, which is the highest interstate point, and all of a sudden a 2-lane highway in each direction is down to a 1-lane that alternates directions with like a cop telling you which way to go.
That was because like a rock slide.
Yeah,
right?
there's a
So-
rock slide on the. If you've ever driven through that section going west, there's like one side of the highway that's like elevated, and the other side of the highway that's like down low. And the elevated side is the westbound side, and that's where the rock slide happened, and it closed the entire highway.
And up to this point, you guys are screwing.
Yeah, we were on pace to, I think at that point, come in an hour early.
Yeah,
And then-
Yeah, we
this
were looking at
is-
24.
This
Yeah,
is like pace.
This is pace, right?
yes.
Because
We know things
Quote,
change.
quote, unquote,
yeah,
pace.
but
you always want to be ahead of what the time is pace wise, and we were ahead.
right, you have to buffer. You absolutely
Yeah.
have to buffer.
So we came to a complete stop, put the car in park, and turned it off to 12 minutes. And again, talking about pace, 12 minutes will cost you 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then-
just stopped.
And then from the Rockies to Redondo Beach, with the
Oh,
exception of
my
a
God, yeah.
small stretch of Utah, everyone coming back from Moab,
Oh my God.
it was RV, it was truck and trailer, truck and ATV.
Everyone had a boat.
Everyone
Oh,
had
I
a boat.
remember this because
Every boat west of the Mississippi was on that highway that day.
I remember like literally screaming at Mission Control about lake people. I was like, these fucking lake people. I
Lakers.
hate lake
Damn
people.
lake people.
They fucking just leave your goddamn
That's,
boat at the
that's what
lake.
happens when you're from Massachusetts and you're used to the ocean. It's like, damn lake people.
Oh, dude, it was brutal. And that's the thing. I'm like looking at this, and it's just every dick with a boat and an ATV had a trailer and a truck that was going 55 miles an hour. And they were, drag racing each other at 55 miles an hour side by side.
So there was no way to make up time. Like our first run, we made up so much time on that back half.
Right.
But it's because we were coming through the desert.
At night.
At night, not coming through Arizona, or Nevada, Arizona, Utah, with traffic.
See, this is why I don't think non-cannonballers understand that it's not a one-shot deal. It's not like, oh, I get in a car and I drive. It's like you understand fully that you need to be on pace for at least like 2 hours ahead of what you need before Denver, or else it's probably over. Like that's the fastest part.
Right. So, yeah. So, I guess going back to our first run, the first one we took like more of the traditional starting time for Cannonball. We started late at night in 11 at night.
11, yeah.
In New York City. Thinking that we'll get out of New York City at night, we'll enter Los Angeles at night. Those are the busiest portions of the run. There'll be less traffic, and then we'll go through the middle of the country during the day. I think that we came to the conclusion that was not correct.
Right, because you spent so much time open in the daylight in the southern route, which was a nightmare for cops.
And remember, we went with all of our planning, and our planning was all normal traffic patterns, normal world.
Yeah.
When it turned out that the more, especially during COVID, the more darkness that you have at the beginning to bank time, the better. But we didn't know that, so we were still looking at what. We were still based on our planning from pre-COVID.
Yeah, so the first run you were leaving after sunset. It was like 8 or 9 o'clock, right? 11 at night. 11 o'clock.
11 at night.
Right. And so now you're realizing, wait a minute, we want to drive under darkness for as long as possible. Right. So you've got to leave before the sun sets.
Right. So we left the second run at 8 p.m. and then the third run at 6 p.m. The issue of doing that is you have the darkness from Ohio to Denver, essentially. So that's where you have to make up your time. And whatever you get when the sun starts coming up, that's it. And you just lose time. There's no chance to make up time after that. You're in traffic. You're in Las Vegas traffic. You're in the Rockies. You're in Los Angeles traffic. The last hour of the run, you are in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, and you're lucky if you're doing 80.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lucky.
So you're just, once you hit Denver and start getting to the Rockies, you just see your average fall and fall and fall. So whatever you got overnight, there's no chance of making it up, which was opposite if you leave at night and you're getting into Los Angeles at night, you can go fast through the desert because there's nobody at night. But you can't do that if you're leaving when it's still light out. Like that's just one of the things you have to accept. That's like the drawback of doing that.
So basically you had a shitty time the rest of the way from Denver to LA in that run too. That's got to be what?
What I'll say is that the driver from when we were stopped in the Rockies till LA got us back on pace, but it wasn't enough of a gap.
Right.
Because we had that Utah stretch where it was really dead before we hit that traffic for 15 that kind of that cuts in coming from Moab, essentially, or from the lakes, if you will. So we, it was pretty. We thought we might be able to gain it back, and and then once we hit that traffic, we watched it. There was a time that our we have a timer in the car as part of our carputer that Christoph built. We it was saying you will need to do 199 miles an hour the rest of the way to beat the record.
It only said 199 because that's the maximum speed that I allowed it to go up to. It would have been much higher.
So we just knew as we saw that creeping up, as we doing 85 miles an hour in traffic behind a boat, and then behind an RV, which was behind a pickup truck, which was behind God knows what.
It's just not
wasn't
gonna happen.
We just knew it wasn't going to happen. So we came in at 26:29, which was lower than the A8, lower than our old time.
Yeah. So now
but at that point, we knew that 2 other people had been sub 26.
Right.
So we were we just again, doesn't matter. We missed the thing by 40 some odd minutes, and that's what happened. So I think we had more anger the second run.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the first run was all stuff that was in our control that we messed up. We messed up. We had bad fuel stops. You could have put yakety sax on when we were doing the fuel stops in the first run. Definitely. It was, we were falling over each other. It was a disaster. We got pulled over. There was a lot of things that we could have done a lot better.
Right.
The second time, we feel like we executed the plan, I think, pretty well, but we felt like we got screwed with the traffic through the Rockies, the traffic in Nevada and Los Angeles. We kind of felt screwed over by that. And I think so. I was angry
We
about
were
like,
angry.
The universe had wronged us.
Yeah.
That was my opinion of it at that time.
And at this point, you've got a third driver who doesn't maybe who shares the anger, but not in the same way.
No, I would say Sam was not jovial, but he was like the fact that he participated in this was like so exciting.
But
for him.
you're playing a win.
What's that? Yeah, I'm playing to win it, and he's like, we did such a great job. We got the third fastest time ever. Like, like all this stuff. I'm like, I can get that, but like, again, no one cares who got the bronze medal. Right.
Yeah.
And it was really that flight home was definitely it was interesting. Number one, some of the things that happened on the flight home, but it was a rough flight home. And then that was when like all the riots were going on.
Right.
It took a month to get the S8 picked up out of LA because no trucks, no car carriers wanted to go in LA for fear of protests and riots, like busting all the windows, lighting the cars on fire, all that kind of stuff.
There was at one point, I think you were going to fly me out to drive it to Arizona, just to get it picked up from fucking Arizona.
Yeah, because I could have got it picked up from Arizona, wouldn't have been an issue.
Yeah.
And then so we basically had to pay someone like an extra $1,000 to finally go get the car. It was just like, oh Jesus, to get the car back, and but like this thing doesn't have a third run in it. We're like, we just, the car. In other words, we needed to do a lot of work to the car.
Right.
So we got the car back together. We fixed some of the issues that were there with it. And then the car ended up selling to somebody that was excited about having the Cannonball car.
Yeah, that person reached out to me. They're like, hey, is this the car? Yeah. And I said yes, because I'm thinking to myself, I want you to have full disclosure on what you're buying.
and I think...
only driven on Sundays.
Only 6,000 miles by the last owner. No worries.
So, I don't know if there's anything else on run 2 you want to ask us about.
No, it's weird because now you're sharing this dynamic with each other, the two of you, also with a third person who doesn't quite have the same investment emotionally, right? And it's not to say that like Sam, has anything other than excitement for the run and whatever, and he's disappointed by losing, but it's like, now you've done it twice, and it's not a fun trip. It's not an enjoyable trip. And now you've also invested legitimate amounts of money because you've got the car, you've flown spotters, we've done hotels. I think my team was 6 or 7 people at that mission control, and it was hard to drive home that night because I remember, you got to remember, like mission control is also up for 40 hours.
Yeah.
We're watching this, and then at the same time, we feel this need to be a little bit of a rock for you guys. So when you pull in and you're pissed, I don't know why I feel like I have to console you, but I do. I feel like I have to be like, guys, you did a great job, blah, 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 blah. Like, you're not dead, thank God, all this other shit. But at the same time, I'm fucking mad too. Exactly. No, exactly. And I'm fucking mad too. And I'll never forget, you do, as mission control, we have to be your outlet. We have to, and to some extent, you become a punching bag a little bit when there's traffic, when it's like acts of fucking God. And, I can hear you guys yelling and screaming in the car, and it's not a pleasant thing. And, but what am I going to do? There's nothing I'm going to do. I remember finding fucking, just to make you feel better, I remember in Arizona, there was a small stint. Luckily, it wasn't as bad as Denver, but there was a stint where you guys were almost at a crawl. You guys were at a standstill. And we were preparing for it, and we started looking for fire roads that were like a raptor, a Hennessy Venom Raptor, or a Hennessy Velociraptor couldn't make this. And I just remember giving you alternate routes to make you feel better. Just to let you know that and I knew you weren't going to take it, but.
Yeah. So I'm like, Tom, that's a dirt road. Yeah, but it's on the map.
I wanted you to be able to make a call to say no. Like, I wanted you to have an option to decline, to feel like you said no to something that would have been a worse choice.
So I think that's a misconception I think a lot of people have of Cannonball in general. I think a lot of people that don't know anything about it think that one day we're just like, we're going to do this. You just jump in a car, you drive to New York City, and you're like, this is going to be fun, road trip with my friends. And then, it's
fucking awful.
It's months of awful planning.
It is absolutely awful.
With spreadsheets and spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet. And then it is awful in the car. You're miserable. You have to stay awake for like 30 hours straight. It's
anyone that thinks that they can just post shutdown, that thinks that they can just jump in a car and do this, they're out of their fucking mind.
Yeah.
I mean, you're dumb. Like, you're dumb.
Before we get into the third run, I want to take a minute to talk about like just bodily functions. I mean, you're in a car for a very long time. I pee so much. Like, it's a miracle that I'm getting through this without running up and going to the bathroom, because I drink coffee all day. I drink water all day. Like, you're nervous. So now, like, we're little suburbanites out here. So, like, it's not like we're always used to having a nice toilet at our disposal.
So
I've heard you have a ritual.
Yeah. So how do I put this? So the last thing you want to do is have to do number 2 when you are on a run like this, because that would end things very easily. I know Ed Bolian, I think, had a bedpan in the car just in case, but we were not going to bring a bedpan. So each of us did a cleanse the couple days before we left.
I would like to go on record and say that I did not do the cleanse.
Well, you did a cleanse, but not the same kind of
Not
cleanse.
a different kind of cleanse.
Oh, you did the dairy cleanse.
Yeah, I am lactose intolerant.
So the others, we all did this cleanse with Miralax and all this other stuff. And, the whole idea is if you get everything out of you, you're not going to have to go for a few days.
Right.
So that's essentially what we did. Because honestly, it's always the first question is, how'd you go to the bathroom? So on the first run, we stopped, I think, to piss like 3 hours in. And then we only stopped, for the fuel stops. And what would happen is someone's holding both fuel canister, both fuel nozzles, one in the back, one in the side, and then the other 2 are running in to pee, and then you come out and you grab them, and then the other
so
person
you do
runs
get
in.
to pee because you are
So
filling 80
But-
gallons of fuel.
but-
Luckily,
Yeah, it
that gives you
does
a little
take
bit
a
of
long
time.
But there
Yeah.
was a stretch on the second run in Nebraska, and our fuel mileage kept getting better and better and better. So we went from that second stretch being an 800-mile stretch to a 1,000-mile stretch. And we got 1,000 miles on a tank of fuel.
God bless the coefficient of drag on a fucking Audi
I
A8
know,
or
and
S8.
that was the fastest stretch.
That was the
too.
fastest
That
stretch.
was
It's
that's
insane.
the Ohio to
So
Denver
we're
stretch.
probably an hour from the Colorado border, and I know I've got 2 hours to have to pee, and I'm like, it ain't gonna happen. Someone give me that Gatorade. So
Yeah.
I finished the Gatorade, put a sheet over me, and just while we're driving along at 175 miles an hour, I'm sorry. Before that, I grabbed the pee bag. We had these pee bags from China.
They do not work.
They don't work. They're made for people in a truck. So if you're in a truck, if you think about the angle you're
Yeah,
sitting
you can
at,
kind of like sit up.
yeah, you can kind of point down, right? But when you're sitting in an S8 and you're sitting kind of backward, there's splashback.
Yeah.
So as I'm like trying not to essentially piss myself, I'm like, okay, this isn't gonna work. So like I stop, open the window, I fling the thing. They're biodegradable, don't worry. I fling the thing out of the window, and I'm like, okay, well, this isn't good. I got to finish pissing. I'm like, give me the Gatorade. So I drink the Gatorade. I finish with the Gatorade, screw the Gatorade top on as easily as possible and put it on the floor. And when we go to get out, everyone's like, who's going to grab the Gatorade? I'm like, I'll grab it. So, but for the most part,
I appreciate that you took that out of the car, because when I had the car for the review, I found sandwiches. There was a lot of stuff in the car.
You literally got the car right off the truck.
Yeah.
I think you came and got it the day it came back.
Yeah, it came off the truck and it was disgusting. And you were like, "Yeah, I don't know if it'll run," and I just drove away. And that was
So yeah, that's your bathroom question. Do
All
you
right.
want to add anything to that?
No, that's good. I have a bladder of steel. I usually only went at the fuel
stops.
stops.
I'm so impressed. Like, you have no idea how impressive that is to me, because in Mission Control, I peed 100 times. I peed a fucking 100 times, and every time I peed, I felt guilty.
We also like really hydrated the week up to it, but the day of, like, hardly drank, and then only were
Yeah.
trying to like a bottle a stint. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you're
just
pretty,
enough to stay hydrated.
You're pretty much dehydrated, like on the edge, but you want to still stay hydrated but not have to piss every 5 minutes. So
Right.
you kind of put yourself in that weird area of dehydration to hydration.
So run 3. Now you mean fucking business.
Yeah, it was. We kept saying, like, okay, maybe we should do this again. What we do again, and like we were both like kind of against it, but still for it.
Yeah. Well, I think before COVID, when we initially were planning this back in around Thanksgiving 2019, I think we were planning on going in April, and then our fallback date was in October. So we're just like, well, it was already kind of planned we were going to go in October. Let's go in October. Like,
Yeah. So we got the S8 back, and I brought it to Safi at AVI over here just outside of Boston in Newton. And I'm like, hey man, need you to strip the car, I don't
Right, because he put all the gadgets in.
Because he and Bren Tuning built the car.
Yeah.
Both times. And so then he's like, hey man, I really want to do this. And I'm like, yeah, I know you do, blah, blah. He's like, well, let's do it again. I'm like, well, we're not doing the S8. I'm like, the S8 is no longer fast enough for what we want to do. I'm like, so he's like, all right, well, I'll strip the car and you let me know what you want to do. Okay. So I went to Chris and I was like, hey, he's going to strip the car. What do you want to do? He's like, oh, shit, we really have to do this again, don't we? I'm like, dude, we have to do this again.
Because this one, instead of like 2 days, it was like a week or two before you said, we got to go again.
Yeah, every time you do it, you take longer to forget how bad it was, and then you want to do it again.
This is why I think women can have multiple children. Like you forget how bad childbirth was, or something. Like you have to block.
I guess that's probably true.
You have to block the pain.
Yeah.
And at some point, you're like, wow, wasn't that wonderful and beautiful?
Yeah.
Let's do it again.
Jesus. So, as I mentioned earlier, I went back to Matt McGovern and I said, hey, I need another car. And he told me I was nuts. And he says, but awesome.
Yeah.
As any car guy would say, awesome.
The shit-eating grin on everybody's face when you tell them, when you involve them in this is phenomenal. Because they kind of give you this look like, oh, you're out of your mind. How can I help you?
Honestly, that's pretty much almost everyone that gets it.
Yeah.
That's their response.
Even a lot of non-car people that I've told about it. So my wife was one of the spotters of on our second run. And she's told her friends, because they're like, oh, what are you doing this weekend? And she's like, well, I'm flying to Colorado. I'm like, oh, that's fun for a vacation. She's like, well,
not so much. I'll tell you more later.
Yeah. And then she tells them, then they're like, we want to know more. We want to know everything about it.
Oh, it's insane. And it's hard to I've come up with the shortest 1 minute canned response because I can't tell the whole story.
No, you can't. You have to. You literally need. I mean, this is the thing. We're doing this for maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Yeah.
It could take a day. It could take this could be an 8-hour thing if we really went through everything. But it's mostly uneventful.
Yeah, people will lose their
the attention span is fucking low.
So I said, I see you have an M5 competition with ceramic brakes. So one of the big issues with the S8 was braking. Now the second one was better with the Giro disc, but it was still really difficult. So
no, and I drove that car, and I never did the speeds you did. I think I maybe did 140 for a minute, and tossed it around and jumped on the brakes, and I was like, this is fucked up. I was like, this is actually not stable enough.
Yeah. So all the research because again, this was one of those instead of talking about cars for a month, this was talking about cars for 48 hours.
Yeah.
Once Safi was like, I'll build another car when we strip this one, we're like, okay, shit, now we got to find the car. So we kind of went back and forth, this and that. And we were concerned about the suspension.
Yeah, but it was a shorter list this time.
Way shorter list.
Yeah, you called me and you were considering a quadrifoglio, a Giulia. And I was like, and I remember just saying, A, too small displacement, you're going to be overclocking those turbos the entire run, and B, the sidewall on those tires, those are rubber bands. It's fun for a back road. But
the quadrifoglio was one of those things where, doing the math on the car, power to weight, power to get out of it, all that kind of stuff, it made sense. And then the more math we did and the more we thought about it, as much as Alfa Romeo would probably give us free Alfa Romeos if we broke a record in an Alfa Romeo,
nothing could be better.
I'm not sure we'll make it. Because
if you break down in an Alpha, everyone's going to go, why would you choose an Alpha?
Yeah, and here's the thing, and not that the Quadrifoglio is a bad car. It's a great car, but but to your point, really small displacement, overspinning the turbos for a very long period of time.
Italian.
But the thing is our 60 gallon, what's wrong with Italians? Our 60 gallon fuel cell.
Engineering is me.
We drink a little too much.
As we sit in front of these, sit in front of these two Italians.
I still want them.
I know. The Alpha was one of those cars. We think this makes sense. I think we were on the Alpha for a while, and
for 4 hours, and then we
moved on to the.
I gently begged you not to buy that car,
and then we moved on to the
M5,
and I'm like, oh wait, I can get one with ceramic brakes. So I start searching, and there's one actually at the dealership we're sitting in, and I said, oh Jesus, can I get that M5 from Boston Motorsports? Yeah, whatever you need, happy to take care of you, help you out on it, whatever. So we buy the car. So I give Safi the car, and we're like, hey, we're not going to do this. We're not there was a whole list of things we did the S8 that we never used that we're like, we're not going to do this.
Yeah.
So we built that car in
Not enough time.
Not enough time.
That was so tight.
Yeah,
It was
we
tight,
were,
tight,
we were
tight,
finishing
tight,
the
tight.
car at midnight the night before we left.
Yeah.
And part of that
Things
was,
were still not working, and we're just like, we have to go to sleep because if we don't, we're going to be up for like 50 hours
Yeah.
straight, and that's not great.
So the reason that happened was we were having a couple little issues with the car, which we ended up solving, and they weren't actually big issues.
No,
at
it was
all.
just like typical BMW. Hey, check engine lights on, and it's some stupid like fuel breather flap.
It was
thing,
something
and it's
totally
like,
dumb. And instead of just like by the fourth time we tried to get it fixed from a local BMW dealer, I said, "Hey, is this affecting performance or fuel mileage?" They're
Like, does
"No."
it matter, or
They're-
is it
they're-
just a
they're
light?
They're like, "No, absolutely not." I'm like, "Why didn't I ask that on the first time?" Because like I was just thinking, let's just get it fixed, and then I just started getting so frustrated with the fact that we just spent nearly $100,000 on a car, and it's not working.
Right.
So like at the last minute, I had called Matt and I was like, "Hey, I might need to swap this for one of the other ones that you have." And then Chris is like, "But that one doesn't have ceramic brakes." I'm like, "Oh." So we just were like, it was a panic. And finally I'm like, "You know what, Safi, we got to build this car." So he's like, "Okay, how much time do I have?" I'm like, "Well, it's got to go to Bren Tuning first to have the fuel system installed."
Yeah.
He's like, "Okay, just as long as I have 3 to 5 days, give me 3 to 5 days." I'm like, "Okay." Well, it turned out all he had was 3 to 5 days. And his guys over there at AVI just banged the car out.
It was
and
nuts.
It was insane. I mean, we got all of the electronics all built in the car. Bren's guys got everything in.
Yeah.
Fuel system, tuning, everything.
But it was right to the wire. I mean, that was.
I mean, literally, the night before, we were having issues with the fuel cell breather.
Yeah.
Um,
and shout out to Pyrotech. They had no idea what we were doing.
Oh, the Pyrotech fuel cell, yeah.
Yeah, we called them like in a panic several times, like, this is not working. We need something that does this. And they're like, what the hell are you doing
Well,
with this
that's the
car?
thing is all
And we're
these.
like, yeah, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Just,
all
just
the-
give
all-
us parts.
Exactly, yeah, because all these companies, they're all the type of people who like they're dealing with like race teams or they want to know what's going on so they can give you the right advice, and you're
Right.
basically like you can't tell them.
I think
Yeah.
towards the end I think towards the end they started to realize like I think this is some type of time trial car or something, right?
Yeah.
We weren't very honest with them, and they gave us great info considering they knew half of
What
half
we were
of
trying to
everything.
accomplish, yeah.
And they overnighted custom made parts to us for fuel setups that probably would only apply ever to a Cannonball car. So like big shout out to them for hooking us up
And
with
fucking not asking questions. They're
Yeah.
great.
And it was like they get on the phone with like Safi and his guys at the shop, and they're like, yeah, we'll build that, we'll overnight it, you'll have it tomorrow by noon. Wait, what? And like they're in Oregon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
it was like they overnighted us apart, and the part would be there on
were
time.
great.
And then, we realized we needed some more AN lines and some more AN fittings. So I called a friend down in Freetown, Massachusetts, and I the only place nearby that had all this AN stuff.
It's so weird.
And like hop in the car, blow down there, blow back to get buy way too much stuff because like, well, I don't really know what we need. I'm just gonna buy it all, and that stuff is not cheap.
No.
And so brought it back, got it all set, and like midnight on that Friday night before we left.
Having never tested the fuel
we
system
literally
ever.
never tested the car, and we got in the car and
We had no idea what our fuel mileage would be. We had no idea if the fuel system
we're with
would
the
work.
S8. We overdid all the
We
testing.
knew everything.
Everything.
So
Yeah.
I remember you put in the spreadsheet what you thought it was going to be, and we were having a text chain of like, what's the over under on the fuel economy? And I think me and you both guessed within about a mile per gallon. I think I said 7 or 7.5, and you said about 7.5.
Yeah.
and we ended up at 6.5.
6.5. It was unfucking real. I'll never forget the first stint, because the first stint in the Audis, you could get like nearly 800 miles out of that car.
Yeah, because with the Audi, even like really beating the bag off that car,
11,
you were getting
yeah.
11 miles per gallon.
Yeah.
And then I think I said to you, hey, Tom, we're going to need to redo our fuel stops. Like, why is that? I'm like, because we're currently averaging 6.9 miles per gallon over the last 300 miles.
It went from like I thought we were gonna fuel up in like Illinois to like we're gonna just crest into Ohio.
We barely got into Ohio.
It was
Yeah.
fucking unreal.
So for
that M5 is a pig.
Yeah.
those who don't know, we scouted out fuel stops like along the route. So you
I have a
Yeah.
list. I have like a binder
Yeah.
full of fuel stops all across the country.
Right.
And it's
Based on getting 10 miles per
yeah.
gallon.
So you figure like we thought we would get maybe like 10. So you think worst case scenario you'll get like 7.5, and best case scenario you get like 12.5. So if you do the math and how many miles that is, you can just say like, oh, between X amount of miles and X amount of miles, I'll just scout out a fuel stop every like 20 miles, and scout them out, make sure they're right near the highway. And so we had that binder of all the way across the country of all of the different permutations of fuel economy of where we could stop. And then immediately we just threw the binder out. We need a closer stop.
3 hours in, I think I was like, well, this is all fucking useless. We're redoing fuel stops.
And we had you and the rest of Mission Control doing the math of, okay, we think you can get 52 miles. Like, yeah, that's not going to work. It's 48 miles to empty. Oh, 42 miles to empty. And it was and at that point we were like, we don't want to slow down.
No, the strategy this time wasn't like, hey, let's milk the tank.
No,
because run 1 and 2, it was a little more like Alex Roy method of like, hey, let's see how far we can get on the fuel. Let's try to limit our exposure to outrageous speeding fines. Okay. Let's do this. Let's do that. This car, it was like the car will do 192. Let's go 192.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
the first runs, we knew the S8's fuel economy pretty well, so we could plan gas stations, and we planned that fuel cell to make it across the country in 2 stops.
It went according to plan. It really did.
And like there was
2 stops, guys. Yeah. Like anyone listening, 2 stops in the Audi, New York to Los Angeles. This car was 5
stops.
So. Yeah,
sort of.
Well, we'll talk about that.
4.5.
But all right, so the strategy, though, was definitely a little more speed-oriented. I think the fact that you guys were literally out for blood on this run was just different. The vibe was not the same.
I think I said to everyone, like, yeah, this is a business trip. Like, there's no fun with this at all.
We increased the spotters by, 25%?
Yeah, so
we had like 30 spotters.
We ended up with 38 spotters.
Yeah.
Plus the 10 Mission Control team.
Yep.
No, more than 38. 42. It was 42.
Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was 42. And then the 10 spotters of the Mission Control team, spotters, but
yeah.
And
then a new driver.
And a new driver.
So,
so
we should shout out Safi.
Yeah, I mean, so we've mentioned Safi from ABI a few times, and he's the one that had built the car. Safi's a
psycho?
I wouldn't say he's a psycho, but he just his ability to just drive fast in any condition.
He has no sense of self-preservation.
He does not. It's incredible. Like what's wild though is he is a relatively safe driver. Like I felt comfortable watching him drive at this speed.
He's really good. He just does not care. Doesn't.
No, there's no.
I'll do 180 for 5 hours. I don't care. It's just
it's insane because here's the thing. I think everybody else, we've all driven fast. We're all comfortable on a rally.
Yeah.
You get in the spirit of it, and it's fun to drive fast. But at the same time, there's still this little, I guess, what most people would call a conscience that says, hey, there might be something ahead, or there might be a deer, there might be a cop, and it's those things that hold you back from actually going full tilt.
Yeah.
Safi does not have that. The way that a psychopath doesn't feel emotions and has to fake it to mix in with normal society, Safi doesn't have that when it comes to speed.
No, he doesn't. And I think when he had said, hey, I want to do this with you, Chris and I were like, okay, he's going to go really fast.
Well, we were afraid. So I don't know. Fuck it. Well, let's just talk about this because run 2, he was in the running. He was in the mix of when we were talking about who was going to be the third driver. Yeah. And even I was like, I don't think he should go. He might be too crazy. And we talked about that. That was a genuine discussion.
And then we realized we need crazy.
That's all you need.
You have to. And the thing was we just gave him some rules of don't do this and don't do this. And he just stuck to them. And he went fast. I mean, he went really fast. I mean, we got to the Rockies in less than 13 hours.
Has anyone done that before?
I don't know. I can't imagine anyone have.
Well, we heard that, from Arnie and Doug and from Ed that they got to Denver with an average speed of 125.
Yeah.
We got there at an average speed of 122.5. So, I mean, technically they must have got there quicker, but I don't know where we could have gone quicker. I mean, we were a little delayed going out of New York.
Yeah, well, all right, let's talk about the context of the timing, because what was different on the third run? There was not a single state lockdown.
Nope.
Right, no.
There wasn't the riots where...
No, the country was as open can be. And it...
Particularly the middle of the country.
Yeah, the middle of the country was like...
And nobody gives a shit.
Yeah, no. So, I mean,
there were no masks. We pull into fuel stations. We have our masks on.
No one's
look at you like you're
look
crazy.
at us like we have 7 heads.
Well, that's what's crazy is you're pulling in a fucking Cannonball car that's decked out in antennas and iPads.
And they're looking at you because of the mask.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, oh, what are these fucking snowflakes? And you're like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so... New York, it took 15 minutes to get out of New York. So we tripled the amount of time it took to get out of New York from the first time. So again, talking about pace, right? There was lots of stopped in traffic in New York. So that's a spot where Arnie and Doug and Fred, who are faster than us, were able to save time. We had to stop 5 times. We had a fuel pump issue on one of our stops. That's why we had to stop another time. And, you know, those stops couldn't have been any faster. Like there was no.
You guys nailed it. Every time I was timing them at Mission Control, because this time we did it at our friend at Sam's house.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking like 7-minute fuel stops for
consistently,
right? For 3 people to piss and to fill 80 gallons of fuel.
Yeah, we had the fuel stops down.
They were incredible. I was so impressed with you guys on this run. That's when I saw your not the first fuel stop because the pump sucked, but the second fuel stop was when I was like, oh, this is gonna go well. Yeah. And I watched you guys. I mean, that's the thing. We monitor everything. We have Mission Control, and thank God I had all the people there, because when the fuel stops went out the window because of the fuel mileage, suddenly I had to rely on David and Corey to be like, I need you to find 10 stations
within the next 100 miles.
And like now. And I need it to be confident, and I need you to call ahead and make sure that they're open.
And they have to be right off the highway. They can't be in a town.
I mean, imagine you're at a fuel station and you get a phone call that says like, hi, are you open? How fast are your pumps? Like, I mean, who the fuck gets that?
Do you have new pumps
call?
or old pumps?
Yeah. When do the pumps get replaced?
Yeah.
And like, these are the questions we're asking these people.
And these people are like, I don't know. I just check people out. Like they're not.
They're like, I have no idea.
I was asleep 5 minutes ago because it's 4 a.m.
Like I sell combos. End of list. Like, so run 3. Let's go through the postmortem of this, because at the end of the day, it's a 25:39 run, right? Sorry, 25:57. What was the showstopper?
I mean, the showstopper. Well, there's two. The two biggest issues were we got stopped for quite a while. The agricultural stop. There was like a lot of traffic there that we skirted some of it, but we got stuck in some of it. And then we had a little bit of a hostage situation.
We weren't the hostages.
We were, yeah. Thankfully, we were not the hostages.
To be honest, I kind of wish you were, because it would have felt less brutal.
Yeah. So, and at the agricultural stop, not only were we stressed out because we were stopped in traffic in the agricultural stop, we were going back and forth with Mission Control about which way do we go out of this agricultural stop, because someone tried to kill themselves and now have their family held hostage in the Cajon Pass.
I have gotten so much shit because I said Cajun Junction, and I thought it was Cagun, and it's Cajon.
How dare you? You live 2,400 miles away.
I've never seen so many angry comments about like my shitty Spanish, when genuinely I thought it was like a Louisiana thing. I was like, oh, it's Cajun.
As a train enthusiast, I'm very familiar with that area.
I did not know, and so everyone's like, now I know it's cajon, like cojones.
Yeah. So at that point, you guys said to us, hey, you got to go around that.
Well, just for context, what happened at Mission Control is we started looking ahead, and I remember,
of course, at traffic maps.
Yeah, Ethan's looking ahead, and he starts to see this red area on the 15 start to highlight, and it starts going red, and then it goes blood red to a red that it's like I've never seen that red on a map, and he goes, hey, is this something? And I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, that's something. And then we saw, oh, there's like an accident. And I'm like, that's okay. We got 4 hours before we're getting there. It's cool. That'll clear up. I'm not worried about that. But keep an eye on it. And as we're getting closer and closer, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. We're like, what the fuck is going on? This isn't how accidents work. So that's when we realized it's a hostage situation, and like police, SWAT, possibly National Guard, but I saw some pretty intense trucks out there. And we get a live feed from a webcam that's showing us what's going on here. And we're starting to notice that they're shutting down the highway exits. They're shutting down the highway from the front. They're shutting it down from the back. It's a mess. And this is not clearing up fast enough. So we start looking at alternate routes, because we're like, well, you're going to get there. It may or may not be open. There's 2 ways around it. You either go north across the Mojave Highway, where like Willow Springs is, and then south on, what is that? The
5?
The 14?
Oh, maybe.
Is that the 14 to the 5 or something like that?
It was, yeah.
Or you go to where the traffic is still being backed up to the 18, which is a shorter route across. But the reality is that could possibly have more traffic
because that's where people are getting off.
Yeah, that's where they're diverting. So it was a hard call, and I mean, I really didn't want to make that call, and
I think in a hour time period, I must have asked you 15 times, Tom, are you sure? Tom, are you sure? And then finally, like, Chris, there's no other way. I don't know what else to tell you. I'm really sorry. And I'm like, all right, that's the way we're going.
It's a 50 mile. So I guess to put some in context, like the one across the Mojave Desert is 50 extra miles.
50. So if you think about that, instead of this thing being 2810, it's 2860.
And it's also a route we've never driven.
Yeah.
We had our scout. We had Jeff, our valiant finisher. He went up and scouted it, and I remember asking him, because I told him, I said, I don't give a fuck if you spot. I'm like, I need you to go tell me what this highway looks like.
Yeah.
I said, and he goes up there and he says, it's a runway. I said, how fast can you go? And he said, VMAX.
Yeah. Which, when he drove through it, it could have been, and then other people started to say, hey, we got to get around this, and also took that route.
So when we were doing this in the car, so we were using Waze for our directions. Waze was still telling us to sit in the traffic on I-15, and then almost as we were getting into Barstow, it switched over and it sent us on that Mojave Highway.
Yeah.
So if other people were on Waze similar to us,
I would
imagine they would send them that way.
Yeah.
I do think if we were a little earlier to that spot, we probably if the agricultural stop didn't happen, we would have been fine going on that route, that extended route.
Right.
And if we had got there earlier, we probably would have been even better off because
Right.
I don't think other people would have seen what Waze, changed people to do.
And something that people need to know is up through Vegas, we were on pace for a sub 24-hour run.
Yeah.
We were in like the 2350s.
It was like 2350 was the pace.
Which is no fucking joke, because it's one thing when you say, "Oh, we were really fast up to Denver." It's like, yeah, everyone's fast up to Denver.
No,
this was nuts.
Yeah, we came out of Vegas to the agricultural stop at 2350.
Yeah, that was our. So I guess for those where we're getting these numbers is we have the computer in the car that does the plane stuff. Also has like a built-in GPS because it has a GPS antenna on it. And so I made a little custom display that it gave us basically the time, the distance we'd covered, our rate, at that current rate, what's our projected time, what speed do we need to go to break the record currently, and a couple other, and it did our fuel into the tank and stuff like that. So we had in the car this thing that's constantly recalculating every second of what we need to do, what our pace is. So we had it right in the car, right in front of our faces.
And we double check that at Mission Control because we're doing actual calculations based on what we're seeing, and then you're looking at that, and we're comparing the two to make sure that we're all aligned on what you need to do.
Yeah.
So we get on the Mojave Highway, and like at first we were able to get moving pretty good, and then we start hitting traffic that probably saw what we saw as well. Like, oh shit, let's get around this. So we're moving through the desert, and like, okay, like if we can like do 100 miles an hour average, like we could still beat this by like 5 minutes.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about being ahead of time is that your average starts to look really palatable, because if you've done your job in the middle of the country, you can sit at 80 miles an hour and coast your way down to the Portofino.
Right. So when we get out there, we come up on a environmental police truck.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't go blowing by him. Everyone's like, what do you mean? What do you mean? I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So we like hung back.
We were in discussions in the car whether like we can pass this guy,
Yeah,
like
do
whether
you
this
pass
guy
it?
can pull us over or not.
Yeah.
We had no idea.
So thankfully, a Volkswagen Golf R owner figured that one out for us.
He went blowing past us and past the environmental police truck.
And then as he did that, he puffed a big thing of smoke out of the back of his car too, which I'm sure the environmental police guy
delicious.
absolutely loved.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, all the lights come on, and he
Yep.
pulls them over, and then the road opens up. We're like, oh, and that was like, we probably stayed at like 75 miles an hour for a while.
Yeah, there's nobody in front of him, and there was a lot of people backed up behind this guy.
Because he wasn't. So this guy in the Golf R was like, screw this, I'm going to go around him. Thanks, pal.
Dude,
So-
God bless.
And then after that, like, we were able to make decent time, but like these highways are like secondary highways,
Yeah.
right? So there weren't like, 3-lane open roads. The highway becomes like a road with a light on it.
Right.
You know,
That
They were like
Mojave
legit stoplights.
Well, the Mojave Highway, especially, it looks like if you were to film something at like, oh, we're gonna do a period correct movie in the 1960s about Route 66. That's where you fucking
that's
go.
where you do it. Yeah. And then like you come up with the desert. There's like this airplane graveyard. Like it's just a
It's
weird place.
very bizarre,
Yeah.
and you needed to hold like 160 to make up for the distance.
Yeah, and we're in the middle of the day. Like it's around like
Sun is blazing.
two in the afternoon. There's people out. Like it was.
You can't.
It's just not happening. And then we knew, after that, you're in Los Angeles for a long period of time.
Yeah, and this isn't shut down. This isn't curfew. This isn't
this
like
is PM
this
Los
is
Angeles.
real normal traffic LA.
Yep.
Like, actually, I should say the whole thing was real normal traffic. I mean, from coast to
Right.
coast.
So you roll into the Portofino, and you're off. I mean, we knew for a while because I mean at that point you're 20, 30 minutes off pace. It's just like fuck it. This is brutal.
So
What was this one like?
So, leading up to that, there was lots of not arguments in the car, but like
You don't have to sugarcoat it.
yeah,
It was shitty. It was shitty.
It was definitely two people trying to coach one person, and we finally got that shut down towards the end of
Yeah.
like who's going to do what and who's going to tell who to do what, which I think was more, hey, you've been in the car for really 30 hours at that point because we all drove down from Boston to New York, and like there's this whole like you're done, man. Like you're done with each other. You're done.
Well, plus it's like a Le Mans stint where like sure the guy in the middle of the night put in all this work,
Yeah.
and then there's got to be an emotional crumbling at
Yeah.
the end when it's like, oh my god, I wish I was driving, or I wish this was happening, and all this other crap. It's like,
Yes.
you know what, you got to just accept
So-
what's going on.
So I'd
Yeah.
say in LA, like we definitely like were able to like keep the time reasonable. And then again, California Highway Patrol, like there was just like things that just kept like eating away. So we ended up rolling in at 25:57, which was 19 minutes behind the record that was set during shutdown. So like if you think about that for a second, we almost broke a record that was set when there was no one out, when everyone was out, right? So it's like, okay, since then, people are like, oh, well, you guys have the record because those other ones have an asterisk. And it's like, no, like the thing about Cannonball,
There's no rules.
there's no rules. Like you have to, the car's tires have to be on the ground at the red ball, and the same car's tires have to be on the ground the whole time, all the way to the Portofino. How you do it in between is up to you. Now, you can't like get out of the car and have a driver swap happen from a fresh driver in the middle of the country. It doesn't work that way. But like, will I say that we have the record? No.
We have the fastest average time.
We have the fastest average
That's
speed.
true. You do
and
have
the
the
highest
average
average speed, and we have the fastest time, post COVID shutdown.
We went 50 extra miles.
Right.
Yeah, and we went 50 extra miles and still only missed it by 19 minutes.
Yeah.
So, I would say if some guy didn't try to off himself on the highway and then hold his family hostage at gunpoint at the same time, which I'm not really sure the logic there, but not a lot of logic
I'm
of people that try to kill
fascinated.
themselves.
Yeah, I've never been such an asshole because in my brain I'm like, why couldn't you have just aimed properly? Like I fucking hate myself for thinking that, but
I
at the
mean,
same time I'm like, oh.
If you do the math, Chris, if you take the 50 miles out and you add, what do you think we would have finished in?
I think we would have been low 25s, probably.
Like 25-10-ish or so?
I do.
Yeah.
I think because I was already gearing up. One of the spotters, I needed him to go further, and this is like in the middle of the country, and I needed Utah. Utah was where it was really empty, and we didn't have enough spotters. I convinced a spotter to stay on the road for an extra like 100 miles because at first he said no, and then I wasn't on the phone with him because I don't talk to any of the spotters. I talk to you guys the whole run, but I told them I'm like, tell him if he does this, he is contributing to the headline in the article that's going to say you can drive from New York to Los Angeles in one day. Because at that point I was like, we're doing this in 24 hours, and he stayed on the road.
Right.
It kept him on the road.
And I think, we have the fastest time, post shutdown, but it's not a record.
No.
I mean, there's no, like for us, we planned to go on that date. It just so happened that the country was shut down.
Yeah. I think the shutdown both hurt us and helped us. I think it helped us. We went faster than we would have, but I think it hurt us because so many other people took shots at the record. Like when we were planning on going anyway, like, you know, I'm not saying that I think we would have broken the 27, 25, but we could have. And, you know, I think having it be set now on the 25s makes it just that much harder.
Yeah, I mean, so Chris and I talk about that all the time. It's like, you know, he mentioned earlier in this interview that the M5 might not even be the car anymore.
Yeah, so my personal theory, and I've told this to a bunch of people now, is you need to make up so much time. There's no more time to be made up in the middle of the country where it's flat. You need to make up the time where it's twisty, but you also need a car that's fast enough to do that great time through the middle of the country. So, you know, the history of the Cannonball, when it started, it was in 2-seat sports cars with fuel cells and
308 GTS, Porsche 911 turbos.
Right, and then Alex Roy was the first one, I think, that did it in like a German sedan, and it progressed to that because they had the speed, but also you could fit 3 people in them.
It's comfortable.
Comfortable. And at the time, the technology, you didn't really have like Waze, you didn't have Glimpse, you couldn't really do emission control. They were having trouble talking to a plane that was right over their head, never mind like someone all the way back in Boston. So, you know, and I think Ed Bolian and Arnie and Doug, they all used that same formula to get as fast as they could go with that. And now I think that's at a limit, and we're almost back to 2-seat sports cars again. Like you need like a Porsche Turbo S and fill the front with fuel. You don't need the person in the back seat now because you have mission control. Like you've proven that, you know, you don't really need that third person in the car anymore. You need the agility in the car to be able to throw it around some turns in the Rockies.
What do you think? I mean, you're one of 3 teams. You're the 3rd place right now, from what we understand, and which we're pretty confident that that's the truth because we know all the Cannonballers.
Yeah, I mean, there's one group of guys that's out there that never really says what they're doing, but piecing things together, I think they did like 26:05.
Yeah.
But again, they haven't come out. There's really no info about what they've done, but again, piecing things together, I don't think they're that fast.
What do you think about the safety of the 25 realm? I mean, at this point, the speeds we're not fucking around here. Like in the Alex Roy days, you know, we watch Apex, JF's movie, and you know, you see David Maher like really kicking it up and doing 140, right? And now 150 is the fucking bottom line. If I saw you guys go under 150, I was yelling at you.
So, from a safety aspect, like, I feel like the 3 of us are very good drivers, and we've all had some type of training, and we all drive fast cars very often. Some of us drive for work. Some of us work on these cars all the time, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at from that aspect, you had 3 people that were extremely competent to do what we did. The rules that were in place were basically like, hey, we're not doing 100 down the breakdown lane. We're not cutting trucks off. We're not, passing minivans on the right. Like, those are all things that we did a 99% good job on over the 3 runs.
Yeah.
Were there occasions where we're like, oh shit, probably shouldn't have done that? Yeah, but like, that happens on a daily basis.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think there was ever a time that we were unsafe.
No, I don't think there was, particularly in the first 2 runs. I think there was no real even close calls. I think it was mostly like, you know, we had the rules in place. I mean, selfishly, we had those rules partially to prevent people from calling the cops at us. Like, you know, if someone goes blowing by you at a high rate of speed, you're like, wow, that was really fast. You might call the cops, you might not. But if someone cuts you off at a high rate of speed, you're much more likely to call the police. So, like,
especially if it upsets what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know?
So, you know, we want to be safe, and we had these rules to make sure we were safe, and we stuck by them. But they were also in there. And the reason we stuck by them so carefully is we don't want people calling the police on us. So, you know, it's those are the reasons why we have these rules.
And I think there are always going to be people that were, oh, you're endangering people's lives. Like I said, in the last 14 years, 12 out of those 14 years, I've driven over 40,000 miles a year. And the things I see people doing while driving, whether it's texting or eating or hitting their kid or reaching back to get something in the car swerving, and like, I look at that kind of stuff. I'm like, man, that's the real dangerous stuff. Like, that's the stuff that, like, that's a person that's in a Corolla or a minivan that can't correct properly. And I just...
Yeah, we're in a car that's...
extremely capable.
Yeah, capable car. It's been maintained up to we had brand new tires. We have brand new brakes. It's been to the whatever dealership, Audi or BMW, multiple times before we did the run to go through it, make sure everything is perfect. And if it's not, replace it. When in the car, the person who's driving is only driving. That's one of the rules, is the person in the driver's seat only drives. Person
No
in the
phone, no
passenger-
nothing.
No phones in the front, no nothing. Person in the passenger seat is only looking out for him. So you have 2 eyes, 100% out the front of the car. 4 eyes, 2 sets of eyes, out the front of the car, 100% of the time. The person in the back is doing everything that would distract you and have stuff like looking down. You have spotters out in front of you that are running the route, that are telling you about things in the road, potholes, big turns, traffic, construction, police. So like it is the... I mean, obviously, there's always a risk with speed, but it's as safe as you can possibly do it. It's safer than distracted driving. It's just safer than people being on their cell phones, I think. Like we take every precaution, and it's always taken very seriously. And there are rules we have in the car that we don't break, and those rules are to keep us safe, keep other people safe, and ultimately make sure we're still going fast.
What do you say to people who want to do this? And B, what do you think Cannonball proves anymore? Because it started off being a protest of the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. I don't think anytime soon, based on what I've seen on YouTube comments of my video about unrestricted American roads, I don't think we're ever getting that. I mean, number one, what advice or deterrent would you give to new cannonballers who've never done this? And B, what does it prove anymore?
I'll let Christoph go first on that one.
All right. I think so. Good advice to people who are thinking about doing this is that it's 95% planning. Like it's doing the run is kind of like an after fact that you just do after you do all the planning for it. So if you don't want to do the planning, you probably aren't going to be successful. We spent countless hours going through all the permutations, research, building custom electronics for this. Chris spent hours and hours and hours, hundreds of hours on the phone getting spotters lined up and like doing all the people schmoozing and making sure they're going to be in the right place.
Putting them in hotels, buying them dinner, flying them out.
So it's like being an astronaut. Every kid wants to be an astronaut because they want to get in a rocket, but they don't know that guy's like a fucking PhD in physics and engineering, and he knows how to like literally build the rocket.
Right. And so like there's so much planning that goes into it. Is building the car. It's making sure the car is in like perfect shape. Like, people are like, oh, I have a fast car. I haven't changed the tires on it in the last 5 years. But it's like, no, you need brand new tires, and you need good tires, and you need, everything in the car needs to be tip-top shape because you can't have any leaks. You can't have, nothing can go wrong. So you can't have, all this work needs to go into it before you even think about heading to the Red Ball garage. You need to know where your fuel stops are. You need to know where your spotters are. You need to know how you're contacting those spotters. You need to know, all of this stuff before you even get started. So I think planning, and if you can't do the planning and you don't have a plan of how you're going to break the record and what your advantage is over the previous records, then I think you're setting yourself for failure. I mean, if you want to do it for fun and you don't care what time you set, I mean, that's one thing. But if you're really trying to like break a record, no matter which record that is, you need to be honest with yourself about what your advantage is over the current record holder and what you can bring to the table that's different, and whether you can actually do the planning.
It's funny. I see people. Well, my first thing is for someone that wants to do this, it's don't. It's awful.
Yeah. I think I say the same thing now too. I used to talk to people excitedly about this, and now I'm like, every time someone comes up to me because they know I'm involved in this, it's like the biggest turnoff. I'm like,
I read your comments, and people are like, oh, if you had a A6 diesel, or if you did remote fueling, you do all these things. It's like, no, like you are all so wrong, like so wrong. You need a car that is a performance car. There is no, like the fact that that A8, the only reason why that A8, and I drive an A8L, okay? The only reason that car did that was because it was in the middle of a shutdown, and there was 0 people out. You could have done that in any car that would have done 130 miles an hour.
Yeah.
It's just the way it was. But
and not to take anything away from them.
No,
I mean,
absolutely not.
they're the ones that threw that together really quick and made it all work. And they had a plan, and their plan was their advantage over the current record was to take advantage of the COVID shutdown.
And I genuinely,
they did.
yeah, and I
they
think
did a great job.
I think
So-
because they were such an unplanned crew, that's why they got such a bad reputation for what they did.
And I think that's part of it. Like, that run told others, like, oh, it doesn't take much to do this.
Yeah, anyone
Just-
can go out.
Just go do it. That is simply not the case, especially now. I mean, the traffic is insane. The stakes are higher because it's gotten so much media. There are a lot more people aware of what's going on, from a law enforcement standpoint. The planning is insane. I mean, I must have spent hundreds of hours.
Yeah.
Chris has spent hundreds of hours. Now, each time we had a third person in, but because we had already done all of it, it was like, oh, let's add this person in, and they'll help out with what they can do. For
But
example, Sam jumped in, was hugely helpful with spotters and all that kind of stuff. Safi built the fucking car, okay? So, like, each person kind of had their, like, thing that they could do.
Yeah.
And not only that, like, in order to do this, like, we pooled 5 or 6 people's finances.
Yeah.
It was not just, like, 1 or 2 people.
Yeah, that's one thing that we thought was going to be our advantage over Ed and Alex Roy going into this, is that we were all friends and we were all splitting it. My impression of how Alex and Ed's run went is the two of them were the ones that were driven to do
they
this.
funded it.
They funded it. They got it. They did all the planning.
And they grabbed somebody else.
And they grabbed their other co-drivers kind of, not at the last second, but, they weren't as involved with the planning.
Right.
And we thought before Arnie and Doug did this, we thought part of our advantage over previously held records was that we were splitting the finances, we were splitting the planning, we were splitting this between people who were really good friends, and we were doing this for each other. And that was an advantage over one person doing everything. We had 3 different viewpoints going into this.
Yeah. Well, so what do you think what do you think the future of Cannonball is right now?
I hope it becomes more pure. There's the C2C Express. There's another run that not anyone really knows about that's being built, and C2C Express is no longer a thing. There's another run that's kind of hush-hush that's being built out, and it's, older cars, less tech, and, trying to do something for the fun of it,
And
not for the record of it. And,
Yeah.
For me as a car guy, I mean, I work in the car business. I have fun cars. That's literally mostly what we talk about, much to the chagrin of our significant others. They like time how long before we start talking about cars we're at dinner. It's pretty funny. So, like, as a car guy, like, what we did, is there a more ultimate car guy thing than what we did?
I don't know. I mean, it's something I've always wanted to do. It's definitely like a bucket list item that I wanted to do. It would have been nice to break the record. I don't know where Cannonball goes because the record is so low that it is a serious undertaking now. It's not like you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to take a shot at the record. And
Yeah, there is an
good.
asymptotic curve. You are
Yeah.
coming down to the level where, like, can it be done in ideal conditions where you've literally shut down the whole country 22, 23 hours? Yes. Can it be done in real world under 25? I don't know.
So I think I know how to do it. It's going to cost $200,000.
Yeah.
And I'm not spending $200,000 to break a record for no reason.
Yeah, there's no fucking trophy.
Like, there's no trophy. There's no, we've already spent, God knows. Actually, not God knows. I know, but I'm not gonna, because people are gonna be like, wait, you could have done this with that and that with that. But I look at it, and I'm not gonna give anyone the blueprint. But it's a $200,000 thing.
Yeah.
That's what's gonna cost.
It's the undertaking now is so much larger. For when even we started, and that was not even a year ago.
No.
Well, maybe a little over a year ago.
And
it's just such a larger undertaking. To, like you said, it's asymptotic. The lower it is, the more you have to invest, both money, time.
yeah, the law of diminishing returns. You start really pouring money and effort and technology
You need
into
more
it.
people.
And you're literally, you might beat it by a minute. Congratulations.
Yeah. and you need so many people. at that point. Like we had our last run, we had what, like 60 people probably
Yeah,
involved?
60 or
60
70
people involved.
in the
Yeah.
whole affair. Like, I don't know 60 people. Like I'm lucky I know other people who know lots of people. I think I know like 8.
I've been relatively lucky, not relatively, I've been very fortunate that I've made friends all across the country through business, through travel, through college, so on and so forth, that, you know, there are people I hadn't talked to in 12 years, like, hey, I'm doing this. Remember that time I did this for you 14 years ago? Can you help me?
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, do you have a friend or 4 that will help as well?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, yeah, sounds good. And that was just like, that's what we had to do. And then, you know, it was a friend of a friend and a friend of a friend and a friend of a friend. And then, like, now it's like, oh, when are we going again? When are we going again? It's like,
Well, that's what's crazy is they're the ones who want to go again.
they want to go
Yeah,
again.
the
They all
spotters.
want to be a part of it again.
Yeah, the
So-
spotters want to do it more than we do now.
And I think, you know, COVID was such a negative on a lot of people. I mean, some of our spotters were unemployed.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're like, hey, here's a free weekend in Chicago or Las Vegas. It's not open, but, you know, here you go.
It's something to do.
It was something to do. It was something they were excited about. And, like, to be these are guys that are also mostly, and girls, that are mostly car people. Like, they want to say that they were a part of something.
Yeah, that's what blows my mind is because there's really no. It's a kind of a selfless thing, and I was really impressed by the spotter network more than anything else because like we, you know,
They were awesome.
we
Yeah, the
went
spotters
from
were
we
great.
went yeah, I mean we went from let's talk about doing this to you pulled me in for the documentary to let's do mission control to we grew up from complete amateur cannonballers who just had the dream of like what it is to I mean, we're like a hireable entity. Like, it's like if you wanted your fucking team to win, we can coach you to that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, we can set that up.
We're open to offers as
No.
well. if anyone out there would like to hire us.
Definitely cash under the table.
I'm not sure I'd drive, but I'm sure that I'm more than happy to consult.
So I guess at that, to wrap it up, are you going again?
Um,
It's been a couple months.
I'm not going again.
I've said it. A couple people have asked me, and I said if Chris wanted to do it again, and Chris came to me and said I want to do this again, I'd do it again. But if anyone else came to me and said, "Do you want to do it again?" I would say, "No, I'm not." We started this together. We started texting each other about this when we were kids, basically, and you know, and I don't think I would try to convince Chris to do it again because I think he'd try to break my nose.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I would do it again if I thought it was possible. I don't think it's possible,
Reasonably.
reasonably possible right now. I don't know. I mean, if there's another shutdown, maybe. But I think the difference is when the first shutdown happened, everyone really took it seriously because there's a big unknown. And I kind of feel like as time's gone on, a lot of people are not taking COVID seriously. You know, there's a lot of debate whether that's right, wrong, whatever. I'm not going to get into that. But it just means there's more people on the road. So even if there is a shutdown, there's not going to be the shutdown like there was
Yeah, it's not
in the spring.
The real fear is gone.
Yeah.
For enough Americans that even if there's a shutdown, they're going to give them the finger and they're going to do their thing.
Yeah.
Did you like how I put that on you?
Yeah, I know. That was nice. Thank you. I mean, also, too, like, you're back to pre-COVID planning for one of these things. So traditionally, they happen around Columbus Day weekend. That's where we did the right? Was
Third
that
run.
Columbus Day? That's where we did our third run. So I think we have essentially a year to wait until the window opens to do this again. It depends what traffic's like. There's a lot of things can happen in a year. You don't know what it's going to be like. And you're back. Do you start trying to start the run at night again because there's traffic in New York and LA are going to be bad, or do you stick with the leaving earlier? There's a lot of
Everything changed.
There's a lot of variables that changed based on shutdown, open up. What's the right car? You know, we have the M5 still. Is that still a car that we think we can do it in? Do you have to go? I mean, like I said, I think the next step is like a car like the Porsche Turbo. But, I mean, that's a whole other category of expense on top of the M5, which is already expensive,
Yeah. And
which was a whole category on top of the S8 Plus, which was, you know, expensive. Like Chris said, it just gets more expensive. You need more people. I don't know.
I'm not saying never, but it sure as hell is not in an M5 again, and it sure as hell is would take him saying, let's do it. And
Yeah.
that's it for me.
I think it.
And that's
someone would have to prove to me that it's possible. And like I said, I think anyone who goes into this, they need to be honest with themselves of what advantage do they have over the record. And right now, I don't see what advantage we could bring to the table
especially
over Arnie and Doug's record. Like, that's a pretty great record. I don't know what we could do to overcome it that they haven't done.
All right. Well, I have to pee. So that's my thing. It's an hour and 52 minutes. So
Well, before we wrap, before you pee, I mean, a thank you really from both of us. You really
absolutely.
stepped up. We asked you to document this because you're Tedward, and we knew you do a great quality job. And you sort of jumped in the middle of the night one time, and you kind of never left. And you really took this on as yours. And I think you get a lot of shit online about, Cannonball, and this has to be your car, and you did all these things wrong and all this stuff. And I think I would like for people to know it wasn't you, and you want to direct some hate, direct it at us. But there's really nothing to hate here. We did things in the most pure manner we possibly could, in the safest manner we could, but we couldn't have done it without you and your team's help.
Appreciate it.
That wouldn't have gone well for us if we didn't have Mission Control and you there, and talking us through a lot of difficult decisions and difficult moments in the car, being very much the voice of reason.
And I'm glad you didn't die, because between me and Chris, I think each run we end up with about 40 to 70 calls between each other, because we keep dropping calls through certain parts of the country. And if you died mysteriously within 24
They
hours
would think
of that,
you killed me.
100%. I look like a fucking stalker with those phone calls.
Just to kind of explain that, like, we would keep Mission Control on the car, in the car, and my phone would be connected to Bluetooth. As anything, you drive 2,800 miles, you are going to drop a call from time to time, and generally it's 50 to 70 times. So if we did die mysteriously and no one could find us, everyone would think that he killed us.
Yep, Verizon is going to be like, you were on the phone with this guy for like 25 hours.
50 times. So thanks again, Tom. We
We
Thank
really
you guys.
appreciate it. We couldn't have done it without you.
And thank you to the spotters, just because you
Oh my
guys
God.
do like the crazy. I mean, we
I
thank
can't-
them
I
all the
can't-
time. Like, it doesn't even make sense that they do this for us.
I know. I can't say, like, what's the single biggest thing that helped? The spotters.
Spotters.
I can't, like, you
That's-
could have nothing in the car. By the way, the laser jammers, one of the most expensive things
Worthless.
ever, never went off once.
Never.
worthless.
We had them in the car for all 3 runs, and they never went off.
Yeah, guess what? When you pass a cop at 180, he doesn't give a shit what the lasers think.
Yeah, it's just, so for all the expense and all the gadgets, it was the spotters, our scout team, and Mission Control.
Yeah. The spotters, we couldn't have done it without you. I know a lot of our spotters are planning their own runs for a variety of different, like, records, motorcycle record and whatever. And if you need a spotter, I am there.
Yeah, we have the craziest network. I think we have probably the largest network of people willing to help out with this. And that's what's incredible, is we went from a grassroots team to this team is genuinely world class.
And they're good people.
And they're good
Yeah, they're
people.
all good people.
And the crazy thing is, they all kept their mouths shut until we told them they
Oh my
could.
God, they're better than
Insane.
Yeah.
Insane.
They're definitely better than my wife. My wife told everybody.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for being on. I'm glad you're alive. And if you're going again, I'm in, but I don't want to go again. All right. Cool.
So what do you think? Is that what you thought it would look like? Is that what you thought the team looked like? I don't know. I think I've been with these guys for so long that it just seems so normal to me, and it's absolutely not normal. This is a very strange thing to do, and I think people getting an inside look at these teams is pretty shocking and eye-opening for most people. I mean, if you're not a Cannonballer, this is totally strange. But I hope this satisfied the itch to learn about what these guys do, who they are, and the setup. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. And of course, respect the drive. I'll see you in the next one.